These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The hidden history of Big Brother in America, how the death of privacy and the rise of surveillance threaten us and our democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at hartmanreport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Homewreckers by Aaron Glantz, a Pulitzer Prize finalist. The subtitle is How a Gang of Wall Street Kingpins, Hedge Fund Magnates, Crooked Banks, and Venture Capitalists Suckered Millions Out of Their Homes and Demolished the American Dream. It's quite a subtitle. This is from Chapter 21, titled Triumph of the Homewreckers. Donald Trump took the oath of office on a chilly Friday morning, delivering an inaugural address that promised an end to the corruption and impotence that had widened America's historic wealth gap. He understood that his victory had been propelled by harnessing the public's rage and envy at having been left behind in the economic recovery, and that he promised that he would not forget it. Evoking FDR's famous Forgotten Man speech from 1932 that promised to prioritize the needs of, quote, the man at the bottom of the economic pyramid, Trump declared, quote, the forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. Politicians had prospered, he said, but jobs had evaporated, factories closed. Quote, the establishment protected itself, but not the citizens of our country. Their victories have not been your victories. Their triumphs have not been your triumphs. And while they celebrated in our nation's capital, there was little chance to celebrate for struggling families all across our land. This all changes, starting right here and right now, Trump proclaimed. Because this moment is your moment. It belongs to you. This is your day. This is your celebration. End of quote. The moment, however, belonged not to the great mass of struggling Americans, but to the new president's most ardent supporters, flamboyant businessmen who profited off the pain of the housing bust and were now poised to steer the ship of state for at least the next 4 years. As Trump reached out his hand and swore to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, his close friend and inaugural committee chair, Tom Barack, stood behind him, smiling in a blue scarf and black overcoat. Afterward, Barack and Trump embraced at the U.S. Capitol's inaugural platform. The homewreckers had arrived. Barack didn't take an official position in the Trump administration, reportedly turning down an offer to be White House Chief of Staff, Treasury Secretary, or Ambassador to Mexico. Roger Stone told me he could have had any position he wanted, but working for the government would have meant making a lot less money. I don't think he has the belly for public service, Stone observed. Other homewreckers had no such qualms. If they changed the rules of the game now, they could make more money later. Steve Mnuchin, by now dubbed the foreclosure king by his critics, was confirmed as Treasury Secretary. His top deputy at One West, the bank, Joseph Otting, became the nation's chief bank regulator, the comptroller of the currency. Wilbur Ross, the bankruptcy tycoon who bought Florida's Bank United, became the Commerce Secretary, charged with everything from negotiating trade deals to overseeing the U.S. Census. Steve Schwarzman, the chairman of Blackstone, became chair of the White House's Strategic and Policy Forum, a group of business leaders who were to meet regularly with Trump. Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan Chase was named vice chair. Though the group disbanded over the summer after Trump's statement that bigotry and violence on many sides were responsible for a white nationalist killing a counter-protester in Charlottesville, Virginia, Schwarzman, along with Barack, is said to be among a small group of outsiders, including Sean Hannity, who are put directly through to the president rather than being routed through the normal communications channels. Hannity reportedly chats with Trump nightly. Schwarzman has flown on Air Force One. On February 12, 2017, less than a month into Trump's presidency, while the commander-in-chief was dining with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan at his Mar-a-Lago golf club, Schwarzman threw a massive 70th birthday bash at his Four Winds estate, barely a mile and a half away. This time, neither Donald nor Melania Trump could make it, but daughter Ivanka and son-in-law Jared Kushner did, along with Mnuchin, Ross, and a who's who of high finance and culture, from Henry Kravis, co-founder of the hostile takeover firm Kohlberg Kravis Roberts, to the fashion designer Donatella Versace. The party featured live camels, trapeze artists, fireworks, and a gondolier. Schwarzman's tennis courts were covered with Asian-themed staging. The man who'd hired Patti LaBelle to sing Happy Birthday for his 60th was serenaded by Gwen Stefani on his 70th. After Happy Birthday, the peroxide pop star took a, quote, a quick twirl with the birthday boy around a dance floor constructed inside a two-story tent where acrobats shimmied and jumped, the New York Times reported. Unlike a decade before, when Schwarzman's glorious pre-bust bash sparked condemnation from sources as conservative as the Wall Street Journal, this time the festivities sparked very little blowback. In her story, Bloomberg reporter Amanda Gordon reveled in the comparison with Schwarzman's 60th. There were some differences, though, she wrote. Remember that beautiful fur coat on Melania Trump? It was New York in February on a weeknight. This time, no bundling required, with many folks golfing and swimming all day before a balmy night and fireworks alongside a full moon. Howard Marks, the co-chairman of Oak Tree Capital, a vulture firm that had bought and flipped 3,000 foreclosures, told Gordon, quote, "The world is an uncertain place. A lot of people are unhappy with a lot of other people. There are a lot of things that people are upset about. So it's nice to have an evening where everybody's happy, harmonious, and upbeat." End quote. There was a lot of celebrating to be had. In June, the gang got together for the marriage of Steve Mnuchin and his third wife, actress Louise Linton, almost 2 decades younger than him. And then it continues from there. The book is Homewreckers by Aaron Glantz. And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you on this gray, rainy Monday here in Portland. I hope the weather's better for you wherever you are, because it is spring, right? This is the first full week of April. Anyhow, we got a lot on the program today. I want to start out with cutting out the middlemen and getting our energy straight from the sun. I'll fill you in on that in just a moment. Also, in this first hour, I want to talk about Betsy DeVos and her family. They're pouring money into Ron DeSantis right now. A Michigan billionaire family pouring money into Ron DeSantis. Maybe we should pay attention to this. I'll tell you about that in just a few minutes. In the second hour of our program is the news, the so-called news, our mainstream media. Are they hoping for a Trump return or a wannabe Trump like DeSantis? Do they think that would be more profitable to cover? I mean, news was really up during the Trump administration, and it's kind of been down outside of the war. Are they committed to this? We'll get into that in the second hour. And also, why is it that the Fox so-called news viewers, when they are paid to watch CNN, actually change their political views? We'll get into that in the second hour. I mean, this is literally like cult deprogramming. I'll tell you all about that in the second hour of our program. In the third hour of our program, I want to get into the values and systems that make Finland the happiest country in the world and what we can learn from that. And we've got a deep dive geeky science. COVID and diabetes are colliding in a public health train wreck. Some remarkable new study that just came out of the UK where they deliberately infected volunteers with COVID, and they have now figured out exactly how COVID infects the body, how long it's transmissible, how you get infected. It's just an amazing study. And I'll share all that with you. And also a completely separate study on the relationship. 30 to 40% of all the COVID deaths have been people with type 2 diabetes. It's amazing. I'll fill you in on that in the third hour of our program. But I want to start out with the rant that I wrote, my daily rant for the Hartmann Report, hartmannreport.com, which, by the way, you can read anytime you want. It's absolutely free, and there's no ads. So just, it's like, hey, get the word out, right? This is my goal. The headline is "Cut Out the Middlemen and Get Your Energy Straight from the Sun." And the point that I'm making about this thing is that, first of all, if you want to reduce the power of right-wing fossil fuel billionaires in the United States, or if you want to kick Vladimir Putin where it counts, stop using fossil fuels. And the easiest way that the average person can stop using fossil fuels, now I get it, not everybody can afford to buy a new car or even a used car, but if you're at the point where you're thinking about getting a new car, is to get either an all-electric car or an electric gas plug-in hybrid. We need to kick our addiction to ancient sunlight. Now, here's the thing. When I sat down to write this article this weekend, I spent some time on using both the DuckDuckGo and the Google search engines, looking for information about, the cost of driving an electric car versus the cost of driving a gasoline-powered car. I'll tell you right up front, it costs about $14 to drive a normal gas-powered car 100 miles. At last month's gas prices, around $5 an hour. Excuse me, I have the hiccups here. Whereas if you're driving an electric car, it costs $14 to drive 100 miles in a gas car. It costs $5 to drive that same car if it's electric for 100 miles. Same weight car, $5. And that's if you're buying the electricity from your utility by plugging the car into your house. If you put solar panels on your house and use them to charge your car, it costs nothing. But it's like insanely difficult to find that data on the internet. I mean, I defy you to try it. Just try plugging, cost of driving electric cars into a search engine. You will be overwhelmed with websites, most of which you've never even heard the names of, that sound very credible. And then others that are like, the first page of my results on one of these search engines had the New York Daily Post, Rupert Murdoch's publication, and Breitbart. But no useful information. I had to dig down to 30, 40, links down to find this information, which is just mind-boggling. Now, why would that be? Well, it's because the fossil fuel billionaires, fossil fuels are $1 trillion industry in the United States. $1 trillion industry. Last year, according to Forbes magazine, we subsidized, the year before last, 2020, we subsidized, the last year that we have statistics for, we subsidized the fossil fuel industry in the United States to the tune of over $600 billion. Now, keep in mind, we're talking defense budget size subsidies. Forbes magazine estimates the worldwide subsidies in the year 2020 for fossil fuels, $5.9 trillion. Yeah, $5.9 trillion. That's $11 million a minute. So you get that there's a real strong incentive to keep those subsidies flowing. That's your tax dollars and mine going directly into the pockets of petro-billionaires who then fund right-wing think tanks and right-wing politicians. And right-wing websites that promote this. So, number one. And number two, they really just are doing all this based on the fact that people don't understand how energy works. people think the fossil fuels are like some, natural thing that just like, hey, they've always been around. Fossil fuels are called fossil fuels because they're literally fossils. They're hundreds of millions of years old. And they're made out of plants. Coal, oil, and natural gas all started out as plants hundreds of millions of years ago. And what did those plants do? Through a process called photosynthesis, they capture energy from the sun, use that energy to drive a chemical process inside the plant that pulls carbon from carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and hydrogen and oxygen from water vapor in the atmosphere or from water absorbed by the roots, and convert that carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen into substances that we call carbohydrates. Carbo as in carbon, and hydrates as in oxygen or carbon and oxygen, right? Oxygen and hydrogen. H2O, we call that water, right? Hydrates. Carbohydrates, carbon and hydrates. And so the sun's energy is captured by the plant and binds these three elements together into carbohydrates. When you burn those carbohydrates, like burning a log in a campfire or in a fireplace, you're burning into the tree, you're burning the carbohydrates that make up the tree. The heat and light that you see is the energy that was captured by the sun when that tree was alive. When you're burning a fossil fuel, you're burning energy that was captured from the sun over 200 million years ago. We're burning through 1 million years worth of sunlight every day on this earth right now by burning fossil fuels. So why have the middlemen? Why do we, all of the energy that we use is sunlight. It all originated as sunlight, whether it's being captured by solar panels. And it's just in the last 30 or 40 years that we've gotten good enough at this technology, of converting sunlight directly into electricity, capturing sun energy and making it into a usable form. It's just in the last, 30, 40 years that it's become, price competitive and highly efficient. Solar panels today cost 97% less than they did 50 years ago. It's mind-boggling. It's cheaper to use solar electricity and wind electricity, which is also in part driven by the heat from the sun, which changes our weather patterns. It's cheaper to use that than it is to use any fossil fuel now. And yet again, you won't find that easily on the internet with a search engine. I really pity the kids who are trying to write, term papers for high school these days, because there's so much misinformation out there that just has saturated these search engines. So here's the bottom line, and it's very simple and very straightforward. Again, if you want to participate in reducing the power of right-wing petro-billionaires in America and Putin, the petro-billionaire over in Russia, stop using fossil fuels. I mean, it's very straightforward. Use sun directly to the extent that you can. There's no need to wait millions of years for plants to decompose and form fossil fuels. There's no need to then ignite those ancient plants in combustion chambers, with spark plugs. There's no need to convert what you can grab from the energy from those explosions into rotating circular motion. There's no need to have an exhaust system to get the toxic waste byproducts of that combustion away from you so it doesn't poison you. Put it in, just poison the general atmosphere. No need to do that. And no need to have a radiator and a water pump to get rid of the excess heat that can't be converted into motion. So it's straightforward stuff. And it's just like there's not enough just simple, clean, clear explanation of this out there. So I put together this op-ed today just to say this. This is how it works. This is the science behind it. We need to get behind this. And by the way, people say, oh, but I can't afford an electric car. The Nissan Leaf right now sells for $27,000. The average cost of a gasoline-powered car in America right now is $38,000. So don't give me this, oh, I can't afford. Well, I get it. Some people can't afford to buy any car at all. In fact, probably most Americans. But if you're thinking about buying a car, seriously, look at this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's 17 minutes past the hour. Keep in mind, the second largest source of carbon pollution in the United States is transportation. We need to fix this. And welcome back. Janet in Evans, Colorado. Hey, Janet, what's on your mind today?
Morning, Tom. Yeah, I wanted to talk about the op-ed that you're talking about with electric cars.
Uh-huh.
And I purchased a 2012 e-Golf, a VW e-Golf, and it only cost me $12,000. It's a 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And
is that an electric car? I'm not familiar with it.
The e-Golf?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that.
It's like the VW Golf, except it's the e-Golf. It's totally electric.
Okay, cool.
And I don't even charge it at home anymore. You're talking about getting solar panels so that you could, you don't have to pay to charge it. And I have found places that don't charge. And so I basically drive my car for free.
And there's going to be more and more of those around the country. The infrastructure bill that Congress passed last year is going to put up 500,000 of them around the country. Although I'm guessing a lot of those are going to be corporate owned because Joe Manchin got that one sentence slipped into that bill that all of the, what was it, $500 million, I think, or $500 billion, all of that money has to run through a corporation before it can serve the public good. So probably what they're going to do is put up 500,000 charging stations where you put in a credit card and you pay some company. But still, so you're in Colorado. I have friends who live in Los Angeles, and in a lot of the public parking spaces, there's free charging. In some parts of that town. Is that how it is in Evans, Colorado?
I have found I'm in northern Colorado. I'm about 60 miles north of Denver, and I found that like we own Harley Davidsons, and Harley Davidson has a new electric bike out. It's called the Livewire, and so all the Harley dealers have to have electric chargers for the bikes,
right?
And they don't charge, and so we go up there and charge my car all the time. And the dealer up the street where I purchased my car said, "Oh, bring it in anytime, and there's no charge. You can,
Right.
And then across the street is a car park, and I think it's the BMW. They don't charge.
Wow.
So if we, if we're out north of our house and we're low, we just pull into the BMW. I think the VW dealer does it too.
Wow.
Across the street, they don't charge.
Wow.
So basically, if you watch your miles on my car, it will tell me how many miles I have left.
Right.
And if I am within 10 miles, I know basically anywhere I can charge it for free. And I just pull in, and we sit and talk or whatever for 30 minutes or so, and it gives me 50 miles or so to get back home. But I don't charge it at home anymore.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I just know all the places around me that are. And a lot of the dealers are offering this because all the dealers are offering electric cars.
Yeah.
And so if you go and buy a BMW or VW or a Ford, they basically, that's part of the sales incentive, I think, is they say, oh, you know what? Bring it in anytime you want and charge it.
It's like free
as long
gasoline.
as the charger's available.
Amazing.
But I have charge point, and some places you have to watch it because when you go to a charge point, some places they're not free. They're $10.
Yeah, no, I've got two of them. I've got ChargePoint and another one. I'd have to look on my phone, and they charge about twice what my home electric costs. So but it's still cheaper than gasoline.
You just have to kind of learn, and you could even call places that like dealers or whatever, and just say, "Hey, do you have free charger?"
Amazing.
Because they want to get you in and use the charger. And then while you're charging your car, you're looking around at other cars.
There you go.
And you're like,
Janet, I got to run, but thank you.
Car.
Thank you. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. The American Lung Association just came out with an amazing new study where they took Joe Biden's goal of a zero-emission power grid by 2035 and zero-emission passenger vehicles across the United States by 2035, which is a ways down the road, and trucks and buses being zero-emission by 2040, and said, okay, what will happen if we do this?
They discovered that over 100,000 lives would be saved, people who wouldn't be getting cancer and COPD and asthma and all these kind of things. Over $1.2 trillion in public health costs would be avoided, and just massive, and 2.8 million fewer asthma attacks, among other public health problems. They note how extraordinary this would be, what a huge and positive impact it would have on America's public health, and how it's completely doable. The American Lung Association. The one note they say is that, quote, opposition from Republicans and 2 key Democratic senators makes it easier said than done. You can check it out at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. A couple of other things I wanted to point out. The world is watching. And, you know, I framed my whole rant about electric cars in the context of you want to cut Putin off at the knees. Putin wouldn't have the power he has if it wasn't for fossil fuels. 40% of Russia's income is from the sale of fossil fuels. And frankly, that number may be low. It may be even higher than that. But they also, they also supply a lot of raw materials to the world. But they're now they've got these bizarre conspiracy sites. There's just a great article about this over at crooksandliars.com. The headline: Conspiracy theorists claim Bucha massacre is crisis actors. Remember when Alex Jones said that those dead children at Sandy Hook were crisis actors? They were just, kids that they'd made up to look like they'd been shot up and stuff like that. And the parents, that they were all crisis actors. Well, this one, here, one of these tweets, and they're very active on Twitter right now. One tweet claims that as the car is driving along and it passes a dead body, there's a raindrop that runs down it's raining, there's a raindrop that runs down the windshield, and the raindrop kind of distorts the body for a second, and they say, oh, look at his arms moving. He's not really dead. He's a crisis actor. Another one claims that it's fake because the guy's wearing Canadian fighting gear. Well, a lot of Canadians have donated bulletproof vests and things to Ukraine. The Russians are now claiming that all those dead bodies are people who were killed by themselves. They were Ukrainians killing each other. Oh, yeah, great fun. And raping their women, and in some cases they've documented now, rape of children. The Russians are saying, oh, no, that was the Ukrainians who did this. And then there's another one that's very popular. It's all over the internet, or it's all over Twitter in particular. And it shows, a Ukrainian soldier being made up to look like he's been in a war. Well, that's from an old Ukrainian movie, actually. So anyhow, there's that. In addition to that, speaking of, wackadoodles, what are we going to do in the United States if Ron DeSantis is the nominee for president? The DeVos family, Betsy DeVos, this Michigan billionaire family, made most of their money on Amway, on multi-level marketing stuff, have been on a tear against public education for years and years and years. But they are now pouring money into Ron DeSantis. Her husband, Betsy herself, has given, personally to DeSantis. Her husband, Dick DeVos, has. Their son, Rick. Their grandson, Dalton. Their niece, Olivia. Dick DeVos's brother, Daniel. I'm getting all this from a piece in salon.com, by the way. Their brother, Daniel, and his wife, Pamela. Their other brother, Douglas. Dick DeVos's sister, Suzanne Cheryl DeVos. All of them pouring money into the DeSantis campaign. Now, these people are not stupid. Is this the leading indicator right now that probably Ron DeSantis is going to be the Republican nominee for president? And if so, how do we respond to that? He's using right now in Florida the same strategy that Viktor Orban used in Hungary. Viktor Orban said, basically, liberals want to turn your children into homosexuals. That was, honest to God, that was his main pitch. And they're trying to use the schools to do it. And surprise, surprise, Ron DeSantis comes along with his Don't Say Gay legislation. How does America deal with a reincarnation of Donald Trump, only this time a smart guy with a law school degree?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I think somebody other than DeSantis is probably going to be the nominee. I put my money on DeSantis right now. I think he's right at the top of the list. What say you?
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study by Stefano Harney and Fred Moten. This is from the introduction. It starts with love, exchange, fellowship. It ends as it begins, in motion, in between various modes of being and belonging, and on the way to new economies of giving, taking, being with and for. And it ends with a ride in a Buick Skylark on a way to another place altogether. Surprising, perhaps, after we have engaged dispossession, debt, dislocation, and violence, but not surprising when you have understood that the projects of fugitive planning and black study are mostly about reaching out to find connection. They are about making common cause with the brokenness of being, a brokenness, I would venture to say, that is also blackness, that remains blackness, and will, despite all, remain broken because this book is not a prescription for repair. If we do not seek to fix what has been broken, then what? How do we resolve to live with brokenness, with being broke, which is also what Moten and Harney called debt? Well, given that debt is sometimes a history of giving, at other times a history of taking, at all times a history of capitalism, and given that debt also signifies a promise of ownership but never delivers on that promise, we have to understand that debt is something that cannot be paid off. Debt, as Harney puts it, presumes a kind of individualized realization to a naturalized economy that is predicated upon exploitation. Can we have, he asks, another sense of what is owed that does not presume a nexus of activities like recognition and acknowledgement, payment and gratitude? Can debt become a principle of elaboration? Moten links economic debt to the brokenness of being in the interview with Stefan Shukatis, who he acknowledges that some debts should be paid and that much is owed, especially to black people, by white people. And yet he says, I also know that it is, that what it is that is supposed to be repaired is irreparable. It can't be repaired. The only thing we can do is tear this stuff down completely and build something new, end of quote. The Undercommons do not come to pay their debts, to repair what has been broken, to fix what has been undone. If you want to know what the Undercommons wants, what Moten and Harney want, what black people, indigenous people, queers, and poor people want, what we, the we who cohabit in the space of the Undercommons want, it is this. We cannot be satisfied with the recognition and acknowledgement generated by the very system that denies A, that anything was ever broken, and B, that we deserve to be the broken part. So we refuse to ask for recognition, and instead we want to take apart, dismantle, tear down that structure right now. That right now limits our ability to find each other, to see beyond it, and to access the places that we know live outside its walls. We cannot say what new structures will replace the ones we live with yet, because once we have torn stuff down, we will inevitably see more and see differently and feel a new sense of wanting and being and becoming. What we want after the break will be different from what we think we want before the break, and both are necessarily different from the desires that issue from being in the dark. Let's come at this by another path. In the melancholic and visionary 2009 film version of Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, 1963, Max, the small seeker who leaves his room, his home, his family to find the world beyond, finds a world of lost and lonely beasts, and they promptly make him their king. Max is the first king the wild things have had, whom they did not eat, and who did not, in turn, try to eat them. And the beasts are the first grown things that Max has met, who want his opinion, his judgment, and his rule. Max's power is that he is small while they are big. He promises the beasts that he has no plans to eat them, and that this is more than anyone has ever promised them. He promises them that he will find ways through and around, and will slip through the cracks and re-crack the cracks if they fill up. He promises to keep sadness at bay and to make the world with the wild creatures that roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. That Max fails to make the wild things happy or to save them or to make the world with them is less important than the fact that he found them and he recognized in them the end of something and potentially the path to an alternative in his world, or an alternative to his world, excuse me. The wild things were not the utopian creatures of fairy tales. They were the rejected and lost subjects of the world Max had left behind. And because he shuttles between the Oedipal land where his mother rules and the ruined world of the wild, he knows the parameters of the real. He sees what is included and what is left out, and he is now able to set sail for another place, a place that is neither the home he left nor the home to which he wants to return. Moten and Harney want to gesture to another place, a wild place that is not simply the leftover space that limbs real and regulated zones of polite society. Rather, it is a wild place that continuously produces its own unregulated wilderness. The zone we enter through Moten and Harney is ongoing and exists in the present, and as Harney puts it, some kind of demand is already being enacted, fulfilled in the call itself. While describing the riots of London in 2011, Harney suggests that the riots and insurrections do not separate out the request, the demand, and the call. Rather, they enact the one in the other. The book is The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. Two quick stories, then I pick up your phone calls here. Yes, Ukraine is the Russians in Ukraine are slaughtering people, obviously, raping, murdering, killing, including children. I mean, it's like the worst QAnon fantasy has come to life here in Bucha and some of these other regions around Kyiv. And of course, the Biden administration has said there's only a certain amount of sanctions that you can do through executive action. Congress has to act. And 2 weeks ago, the Biden administration put forward legislation, Democrats in Congress, both the House and the Senate, put forward legislation, actually it passed the House, to sanction Russia, to make those sanctions really bite, to really hurt Vladimir Putin. It still hasn't passed the Senate because for the last 2 weeks, Rand Paul has had this piece of legislation on a 2-week delay. Honest to God, Rand Paul is blocking legislation to sanction Russia in the United States Senate. The Republican from Kentucky. Democrats are going to try again this week to get around his blockage, but it's very easy to gum up the works of the United States Senate. The rules are designed for slow and deliberative processes. Right? The other story I wanted to share with you, which I think is just absolutely hysterical, is about Moms for Liberty down in Florida. Moms for Liberty is one of these groups that's behind the Don't Say Gay bill. And the Don't Say Gay bill specifically says that you can't, in kindergarten through third grade, you may not mention, anything about gender or, like if a kid comes in and says, I have 2 daddies or I have 2 mommies, you're not allowed to talk about that in class. You just can't. So this is hysterical. This is a letter that the Moms for Liberty, the right-wing group that supports the Don't Say Gay bill, is all upset about. Let me just share this with you because this is a what's good for the goose is good for the gander thing. Dear Florida parent, this is a letter from a teacher in Florida to the parents. Dear Florida parent, the Florida House of Representatives has recently ruled that, quote, this is from the law, this is verbatim from the law, classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3 in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students, end quote. To be in accordance with this policy, writes this teacher, I will no longer be referring to your student with gendered pronouns. All students will be referred to as the or them. I will no longer use gendered titles such as Mr. or Mrs. or make any references to my husband or wife in the classroom. From now on, I will be using the non-gendered title MX. Furthermore, I will be removing all books or instruction which refer to a person being a mother, father,
husband, or wife, as these are gender identities that may also allude to sexual orientation. Needless to say, all books which refer to a character as he or she must also be removed from my classroom. If you have any concerns about this policy, please feel free to contact your local Republican congressperson. There you go. All right, let's pick up your phone calls. What's on your mind today? Brian in Chicago. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Hello, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I must say you are just the smartest man on the radio. And what you said about those solar panels is such a simple, plain explanation. I'm a homeless guy. I'm squatting here in Illinois. You know, I was in a tent in the woods, and the winter came. Yeah, I built a little wooden hut. It's where I'm surviving now. I work when I can, you know, some low budget, low wage jobs, and I used to have to.
Brian, what's the point? Where are you going with this?
I used to have to hunt down electricity. I would have to sit at the library or a Burger King to plug in my cell phone. I spent a couple $100, Tom. My cell phone has not used fossil fuels in over a year now.
So you got some solar panels for your homeless, houseless shack?
Yes. The police know I'm back here and everything. They look at me saying, I don't know what they think. I don't care what they think. But I have not used a fossil fuel. I have a TV. I have a fan that runs 24/7. I have music. I have a police scanner. And it's all powered by the sun. None of it.
Brian, you need to be talking to all these people and all these websites that are saying, "Oh, you can't convert to electricity. It's too expensive." Well, here's a homeless guy who's doing it. Brian, God bless you. Thanks a lot for the call. Thanks for sharing that story. Tyrone in Harlem, New York. Hey, Tyrone, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Nikola Tesla was well on his way of making electricity free for everybody in this world.
Yeah, in 1922, he predicted that it would solve the world's energy problems.
And he was well on his way of doing it. I was looking at TV, and this guy brought a solar-powered car into a pawn shop. He was trying to pawn the solar-powered car that he made in his garage. So for these people to tell us or try to make believe that there's no other way that things could be operated in this country is a bold-faced lie. These multimillionaires and billionaires know that all they care about is their bottom line. And if they can't make all this stuff, they're not going to follow through with it. And if it burns, if it destroys this country or this world, and they can make money off the ashes, that's what they're going to do. They burn this place to the ground.
That's what they are doing, Tyrone.
Yeah, exactly. So we got to know that we got to stand up against this blatant disregard for our life. This is this amazing study. The Guardian just reported. I'll just give you the first sentence. This is the first sentence of the article in The Guardian. Quote, "A speedy nationwide transition to electric vehicles powered by renewable energy will save more than 100,000 American lives and $1.2 trillion in public health costs over the next 3 decades." And they know this. These people, they know this, and they're not willing to change, and we have to willing to make them change because our life is at stake here. Our kids' life and our future. And unless we stand up for it, we're going to continue to go down this road of self-destruction. Yeah. I wanted to ask you something about, because you said something about joining the Proud Boys. That was something that raised my eyebrow. Then I heard Joe Madison talking about it this morning about what you said, and he was also somewhat disenchanted about you. And I thought about how Africans in the slave trade, that's how they use each other to fight. First you kill one tribe, then you use another tribe to kill another tribe, and then you end up taking over the whole scenario. And that's what I think about when you think about working with the Proud Boys. They're willing to work with you to kill their enemy, but they're also looking to knock you off too.
Yeah, no, so I get it, and it's interesting because among our staff, people who would kind of fall into minority status, as it were. I don't want to get too personal here. It's just probably not appropriate. But were saying, "What, are you crazy?" And the other straight white people on our staff were like, "Yeah, of course." And it caused me to wonder if this is my white privilege showing, that I'm just assuming that probably most people who call themselves Proud Boys, when push comes to shove, are not murderous SOBs, that those are the exceptions to the rule, because, hey, they're white people too, which is entirely possible, right? I'm owning here what may be going on in my unconscious processes. Or is it that minorities, who are typically the target of Proud Boys, whether they're gender or racial minorities, that they are, in their mind, exaggerating the threat that the Proud Boys represent? And I don't know the answer, and I'm guessing that there's probably a little bit of both, but it's an interesting issue that would be a fascinating thing to do some sort of a deep dive psychologically and sociologically into, why those different responses. It probably has more to do with the fact that I'm straight and white, and therefore I'm not, I was going to say I'm not on their victim list, but the fact of the matter is that I have been threatened by them, and I know that, I'm in the business where the earlier version of the Proud Boys, which was the Aryan Nation, murdered a talk show host, Alan Berg, as he was walking out of his radio studio back 30 years ago. So it's not like I have nothing to worry about here. I actually made some notes about that after that conversation, after I got off the air, and thought, this is might be worth writing an op-ed about or talking about more. But I just don't know, Tyrone. I think that it's probably both those things. Maybe there's a third variable that I'm not considering.
Yeah, because it is definitely something that, as a targeted class of people, you say, well, you want to say the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but you don't know how far this guy's willing to take it, and knowing already that he's adversarial against you. That's already one, it's like Russia and United States joined together to beat Germany. But once that whole thing was over with, the Russian is they still understood, America still understood that Russia.
No, I got that. But Tyrone, if Russia had not joined together with the United States to fight Germany, we would have lost.
Yes, that's definitely.
And that was my point.
Something to look at.
That was my point. And it wasn't like, hey, in modern day America, I would ever, hook up with them. But if Portland was in rubble, if 3/4 of the city had been bombed out, if Russian soldiers were coming through robbing and raping and pillaging and killing, I would probably take help wherever I could get it. Or at least I wouldn't be asking people what their political affiliation was, before I stood shoulder to shoulder with them to fight against the Russians. But like I said, it may be my white privilege showing. It probably is. Or like I said, it might be that on the other side, people are exaggerating the risk. So.
This is something to look into.
It is. It's an interesting topic, Tyrone. I'm glad Joe picked it up this morning. Tyrone, thanks a lot for the call. Good talking to you. We'll be right back. It's 46 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a second. Stick around. And welcome back. Maverick in Edmonds, Washington. Hey, Maverick, what's on your mind today?
Well, Tom, funny thing about the Don't Say Gay bill is you have to say gay every time you say Don't Say Gay bill.
I know. That's why they gave it a different actual name, but yes, I get it.
Yeah. So, I'm a petrol head. Have been my whole life. I'm 57, I think, yeah. And let me tell you a little quick story about how I drank the flavor-aid of electric cars. And then I could rattle off 20 things that are the benefits of electric cars, or you could ask me a question afterwards. But for all those petrol heads out there, people that might be skeptical, couple of years ago, I went and test drove a Chevy electric vehicle with the express purpose of hoping that I would hate it. You right?
Right.
This is an inexpensive car, and it was a blast. It was so fun to drive.
Was that the Bolt or the Volt?
I think it was the lower end one, and which I don't recall which one that is. But it was an all-electric car.
Oh, that was the Bolt.
A couple of years later, I had the means to trade in an old car that I'd had that actually appreciated in value, and bought a Model 3, a Tesla. The car's not perfect.
This is the $35,000 or $38,000 Tesla, the cheap one?
I think the entry-level model starts around 40. The mid-level with all-wheel drive starts around 50, and the high-performance one is around 60. And that extra 10 grand, it's absolutely not worth it.
Right.
It's not economical, but
totally
it's status for some people. Anyway, so it's not perfect, but it is such a blast to drive because it's just rocket ship fast. It's fast like a Porsche turbo.
Yeah.
Seriously, within a few tenths of a second of that. It cost me next to nothing to operate. It cost me $1 a day to drive 40 miles a day, and that shows up on my Tesla app. The car it's absolutely quiet when you're driving down the road, which is wonderful. I don't even have to use my brakes. Some days I barely touch the brakes at all because you just drive with your right foot. The car uses its kinetic energy, its motion, to recharge the battery, which slows the car down.
Right.
It's wonderful. And on top of that, so you're not replacing your brake pads as often, and you don't have to clean your wheels as often because they're not getting full of brake dust.
Right.
It's absolutely wonderful.
Which is asbestos, by the way, and or maybe at least it used to be. I used to replace brake pads when I was a teenager.
It hasn't been asbestos for quite a while.
Oh, it hasn't been? Okay, good. That's reassuring.
But it's not good to breathe the stuff in either way.
Yeah.
So, and I could drive from here to New York City without any problem. I just plug in the address, and it'll just tell me, okay, stop here for 10 minutes, stop here for 15 minutes. It might take a couple extra hours. You're driving all the way across the country, but hey, you know, to get out of your car after driving for 2 or 3 hours and walk around for 15 minutes, what's wrong with that?
It's healthy. It's healthy. And the next generation, by the way, the next generation of batteries, they're building these batteries with more and more basically cells in them, so they charge more rapidly. And, you know, we're going to be pretty soon looking at, 5 and 10 minute charges, full charges on electric cars.
It's going to do nothing but get better.
Yeah,
anyway,
exactly.
Tom, I hear the music, and I'm going to come up to a hard break. I got to let you go.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Maverick. Good talking to you. It's 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be right back. Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. Available wherever you find fine books. Remember Paul Manafort? He used to be business partners with Roger Stone back in the day, working for Republican politicians like, Nixon and Reagan. Well, in 2004, he took a really sweet gig over in Ukraine, helping the Russians, President Putin, install Viktor Yanukovych as the president of Ukraine, a nice Putin puppet. That same year, though, the people of Ukraine said enough, and basically Yanukovych got driven out of the country. So they tried it again in 2010. Let's bring, this Putin puppet back into Ukraine, Yanukovych. And it worked until 2014 when they got kicked out. So he gets kicked out of Ukraine, Manafort. So what does he do the next year, 2015? He decides to run the Trump campaign. Are you starting to see a pattern here? Yeah, could be. Okay, there's an entire video that outlines this whole timeline over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. "52 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. And Roger in Lake Ariel, Pennsylvania. Hey, Roger, what's on your mind today?
Something that you had mentioned earlier about Rand Paul. blocking some legislation to not annex, but
to sanction Russia.
Sanction Russia. And this has come up over the years, and I said this is a perfect opportunity to call you and remind you what you said in 2017 in the summer of when 7 to 9 Republican legislators went over to Russia. We don't know what they went over
for the 4th of July.
Yes. And Rand Paul, you also reported Rand Paul delivered a or some type of message to Putin at the same time. And I'm still wondering.
Was that to Putin from Trump? That's my recollection.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I'm, for the whatever amount of years it's been, I'm still wondering why. And no one in the news who report news or read news has said anything about it since that particular time. And I'm still curious. I don't know about you.
Yeah, what did that
note say? Why did they need to go? Yeah, why did they need to go?
My guess is it said something like, why don't you let me build a Trump Tower in Russia? But
and
who knows?
Also,
who knows?
There was something else. There was a congressman from California who made a trip over to the Russian bank in Cyprus. You mentioned that in that year also. And I'm still wondering why is it necessary?
Yeah.
Why would it be necessary?
I'm with you, Roger. Excuse me. Spot on. Thank you very much for the call. Rob in Colorado Springs, Colorado, says you want to argue with me about something?
I wouldn't say argue. I would say debate, Tom. Just quick background, man. I'm a straight white conservative guy, but honestly, I like listening to your show. And
thank you.
You know, sometimes I get a chuckle out of some of your opinions and everything.
But we just have about a minute and a half, Rob. So let's get right to it. What's your bottom line here?
All right, the don't say gay bill. I think that's for one thing in the bill. Nowhere in the bill does it say the words gay, homosexual, anything like that.
It says gender identity,
I think that people
or sexuality.
Gender identity, correct. Right. So it's like, how far? I know you read the letter about to the Moms for Liberty from the school teacher, and you know that was going to take away all gender pronouns and.
Well, that's because that's what the law literally says. That it's just a way of pointing out how absurd this law is.
Well, I don't think it's that absurd unless you really stand it on its head and you stand everything that society is built on its head, which is what this teacher was doing.
Are you saying that everything society is built on is? Well, I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Rob. Finish your thought.
Well, yeah, I mean, everything we know about the human race, basically, that men aren't men are women, and women are men, and your mom's not your dad.
There has been homosexuality in the human race as long as there's been a human race. It exists in all mammalian species and in a lot of non-mammalian species. There's always a small percentage of the population that is not straight. And to trash people like that, to kill people like that, I mean, which has historically been the case, to discriminate against people like that is just so wrong. And to say that if a kid comes into class who is being parented by two dads or two moms and wants to talk about it, and the teacher has to shut that kid up and send him out of the class, I think that's just wrong.
I don't think that's what
that's what the law says.
Law is. I think the law says that they're not going to have sex ed, for lack of a better term.
Nobody does. Nobody does sex ed on kindergartners anyway, outside of what is abuse.
Right. So I think that's why. I think that's the point.
So are you saying that this is a solution looking for a problem?
No, I wouldn't say that. And before we go any further, I was just saying that I did say I'm straight, but I have no problem. I don't discriminate against homosexuality.
Yeah, no, I get
at all.
Rob, I got to run. Thank you. What I'm seeing with the Don't Say Gay bill, and what Disney is seeing, is an attempt to exploit hate or fear of homosexuality and associated things for political purposes. Purely, nothing more.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at hartmanreport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Minority Leader, How to Lead from the Outside and Make Real Change by Stacey Abrams. This is from chapter 1, although the introduction is fascinating too, where she talks about, Rhodes scholarships and stuff, but this is chapter 1. I sit in a living room, a cozy space, warm in the early summer. I'm perched on the edge of a sofa next to Valerie, the home's owner, a lovely black woman in her late 40s. Across from us, seated close together on a wide settee meant for one, are her 2 children, a son and a daughter. Politicians rarely visit their streets, which are nestled in a poorer community in South Georgia. Valerie beams with pride that both her children are headed to college in the fall. David, 17, plans to study criminology. Maya, 18, her belly round with her first child, intends to become a middle school teacher. Both newly graduated from high school, Maya will give birth in mere weeks and begin college months later, an unwed teen mother. Her intended school is more than 3 hours north of her home, so her mother will raise her newborn baby while she starts her freshman year. Valerie speaks matter-of-factly about the coming challenge, raising a new child just as hers leaves the nest. Still, she is determined that both her children pursue college degrees that she never received. Maya, the mother-to-be, wonders how she'll do so far away from home and her baby. Yet in the next breath, she explains how college will be the best for her and her child. Their future success rests upon her. I've come to their home as part of my campaign for governor, so I asked Valerie what she expects of someone like me. What can I do to help make lives like hers better? In her soft voice, she replies, she just wants options for financial aid for her children. They will succeed, she says, if they can afford to stay in school. As I look around the modest home passed down through the generations, I understand both the pride and the desperation tangled in her response. She got them through and has given them the tools to carve out better lives for themselves. We chat more about the worries she's lived with all those years, our discussion turning to the crime and poverty in their neighborhood. Then I ask Valerie what she wants. At first, all I get in response is a quizzical look to suggest I need to reconsider my bid for higher office. Or that suggests. I repeat, what do you want for you? What secret dream do you have for yourself? Her confused expression turns to one of surprise. I don't know, she tells me. I've been a cashier at the Piggly Wiggly for 20 years. You must want something, I probe, something you'd like to do for you. A daycare, she admits quietly. I'd like to start a daycare center for unwed mothers like my daughter, so more girls can finish school and pursue their dreams. But that ambition is beyond her. Her body language, her tone of voice, her averted gaze speak louder than her words. I press her, but she demurs with a smile. Let's just see what happens if you win the governor's job, she says. Valerie's house in South Georgia is not too different from the squat red brick house where I grew up on South Street in Gulfport, Mississippi. An oak tree grew out in our front yard, shadowing the front sidewalk, forbidding grass to grow beneath its shade. Pink azaleas bloomed each spring from bushes that flanked the front door. Our rented house and the other set close by teemed with children, all black, all working class. We played in our postage-stamped yards, make believing the fantastical, superhero exploits, cops and robbers. As we got older, we'd talk about moving to New Orleans or living in one of the mansions along the beachfront that lay less than 5 miles away, across the railroad tracks that ran in between our neighborhood and the more wealthy environs. We dreamed of more, while our parents' lives centered around survival and making it from paycheck to paycheck. Instinctively, we understood that more had to be possible, even if we didn't know what to do to get there. These imaginings, these desires, are the roots of ambition. As adults, like Valerie, we tend to edit our desires until they fit our construction of who we're supposed to become. In such a world, I wouldn't dare dream of running for higher office, for mayor or governor or president. At least for now, Valerie sees herself retiring in 20 more years from Piggly Wiggly as a cashier, rather than as a small business owner who helps the community raise its children. From our brief meeting, I could see she had the fire, albeit of a low burn, of a minority leader. She had ambition, she had vision, but she didn't have the faith, and understandably so. Whether we come from working class neighborhoods or grow up comfortably middle class, minorities rarely come of age explicitly thinking about what we want and how to get it. People already in power almost never have to think about whether they belong in the room, much less if they would be listened to once outside. These men, and they are usually men and typically white, do not have to grapple with low expectations based on gender or race or class. Ambition for them begins with reminiscences of old times and older friendships or newer alliances. The ends have already been decided. Only the means are to be discussed. Most potential minority leaders feel the same lack of faith Valerie had, at least at some point in their evolution. We may not know how to get the first job, let alone make it to the big chair. We don't know how to take the leap from accepting our fates to actually changing them, and not just a little, but radically. Then there are those who simply don't know what they want. The drive to achieve burns inside, often without a clear target. We want to be something, but what that is remains hazy. Often we cannot articulate our goals because they lie just beyond the reach of who we're supposed to be. Ambition's scale is irrelevant. What holds us back is not scope, it's fear. And because we don't know what to call our dreams, don't know how to make them happen, or are pretty sure we'll be disappointed, we just stand still. But becoming a minority leader demands that we embrace ambition as our due. Stacey Abrams. Report called Home, the Most Dangerous Place for Women. The book, No Visible.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So why is the press rooting against Joe Biden? Have you noticed this? Eric Bowler is writing about this over at PressRun.media this morning. He says, like clockwork, the first Friday of the month brought another blockbuster jobs report. This has been going on now, basically, you know, for month after month after month. I think it's been 11 straight months that Joe Biden has had these kind of job reports, ever since he pushed through Congress the American Rescue Plan. We added 400,000 jobs last month in March. He is on pace right now during his first full 2 years in office, which will, wrap up at the end of this year, to have created over 10 million American jobs, with the unemployment rate dropping all the way down to 3%. That's unprecedented. It literally has never happened before in American history. And compare that to Donald Trump, who had 4 years in office, and during those 4 years, he lost 3 million jobs, net. And yet the press, as Eric Bowler notes, shrugs off the good news. Politico on Friday had an article, "The reality of that one strong jobs report does not snap the administration out of its current circumstances." One strong jobs report? It was the 11th in a row. 11 months in a row. So why would Politico write something like that? Why would any news, why is the, and it's not, this is not to pick on Politico. They do some really great reporting. But, you know, is it, we're seeing this all across the press. Why are they doing this? These are headlines from CNN. As a result of this, 11th month in a row of major plus job figures, the economy is doing great. Headlines on CNN. America's job market is on fire. Here's why it doesn't feel like it. Another headline. Booming job growth is a double-edged sword for Joe Biden. Oh, really? Another CNN headline. Why a great jobs report can't save Joe Biden. The Washington Post. Jeff Bezos' publication. Unemployment hits pandemic low in March, but uncertainty looms ahead. Another from the Washington Post. Biden gets strong job report, but sour mood still prevails. Could it be prevailing because you keep telling people it's there? I mean, Axios. This is, again, I'm quoting here Eric Boehlert. Axios contorted itself by claiming Biden's promise to add millions of new jobs, which he's already accomplished, by the way, was being threatened because there aren't enough workers or something like that. In the Washington Post on Friday, when this jobs report came out, it was the 87th story down on the Washington Post website. You had to scroll through 87 headlines to find it. You had to scroll past, what's the best way to share my old home videos? You had to scroll past the Duke, North Carolina rivalry by the numbers to find out that the economy is doing better than it's done since the 1960s. As Dean Baker with the Center for Economic and Policy Research noted, the unemployment earnings situation for more than 160 million people was barely a blip in the American media. On the Sunday's Meet the Press, for example, they had one long feature about how immigration is going to be a problem for Democrats, and another one about how Trump might be a problem for Democrats. Biden's historic economic performance, it was literally 100% completely ignored on Meet the Press. I call it Meet the Republicans. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Republicans, right? So why do you think that 37% of Americans, more than a third of all Americans believe right now that last month the economy lost jobs? Why would that be? When over the last year it's gained 7 million jobs, only 28% of Americans know that jobs are up. Does this not say that the media is not doing their job? Speaking of jobs. So why are they doing this? My theory is that bad news sells. And scary news sells even more. That when Trump was president, every time he said some new outrageous thing and everybody got all, bent out of shape about it, it was more money in the pockets of the news agencies, which ever since 1987 have been driven by profits. That was the year that not only did Reagan do away with the Fairness Doctrine, but that was also the year that CBS took their news division, which was a segregated, separate kind of company within a company that was not designed to make money. Because it was the cost of maintaining a radio or a television station license was that you had to carry news. The Fairness Doctrine required public service programming. And that was the year that CBS moved their news department out of being a separate standalone department with its own vice president and moved it under the vice president for entertainment programming, which is where all the news departments are for all the networks now. I think that they're looking for a horse race in 2024. They want it. The news media understands that they make more money. There's more eyeballs when it is tight, tight, tight. It's why they pushed Trump so hard in 2016. Let's have a horse race. They just pushed him a little too hard. They gave him literally billions of dollars in free media coverage. If Trump sneezes, it becomes a story. So that's story one. Story two, and this kind of parallels to it, is pretty remarkable. This is a groundbreaking new study. The people actually decided that this was conducted back in September of 2020. It's been a year and a half since the study happened. We're learning about it now in detail because it's gone through the vetting process for scientific studies. And what they did was they found 763 qualifying people who got all their news from Fox News. And they randomly selected 40% of them and put them in what they referred to as the treatment group. The treatment group was paid by the hour to watch CNN, up to 7 hours a week, which is nothing, right? 1 hour a day, every day for a week, or its equivalent. 1 hour of CNN. And then go back and continue watching Fox News for 8 hours a day. No problem. We'll still pay you. This is the report as published over at Raw Story today. At the three-day mark, the viewers took a survey. Quote, "We found large effects of watching CNN instead of Fox News on participants' factual perceptions of current events, and knowledge about the 2020 presidential candidates' positions." Keep in mind, this was in September 2020, running up to the election. They discovered changes in attitudes about Donald Trump and Republicans, as well as a large effect on their opinions about COVID. The viewers also evolved to believe that if Donald Trump made a mistake, quote, Fox News would not cover it. In other words, Fox is engaging in partisan coverage filtering. The findings might suggest that the most cost-effective way for Democrats to win elections is to start running their own infomercials and commercials on Fox Network. Yes, let's give them more money. Problem is, Lincoln Project tried this. Occupy Democrats, I believe, tried it. I know it was one of the big Democratic groups running an ad. I think Midas Touch tried this. Let's run our ad on Fox News. And Fox says, no, we won't take that ad. It's amazing. Fox News viewers who watch CNN get smarter. Now, there was a meme over the weekend, turns out not to have been true, that the president of New Zealand said, we don't have political divisions here because Rupert Murdoch doesn't own any media in New Zealand. But he doesn't. Canada said no to Fox News. Could it be that simple that we've got a poison within our media ecosystem?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. I do want to share this story with you on the other side of this break. Okay, back to your phone calls here. Let's see what you have to say. Rob in Mount Iron, Minnesota. Hey, Rob, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. It seems like there's some warped logic out there, and what I got to say is kind of like exactly what you've been pursuing here. It's where it's, with psychology, you work with theory. I'm wondering if you could follow my theory here.
Okay.
Trump said at the beginning of the Ukrainian assault invasion that Putin was brilliant.
Right.
So Trump
Genius.
supports Putin. Genius? Okay. So Trump supports Putin. By the numbers, last election had around 75 million supporters for Trump. Now, it's where all members of Congress and Senate who voted not to impeach Trump, they all supported Trump by not impeaching.
Right.
That means anybody who supports, follows, or votes for Trump by default supports Putin. Trump supports Putin.
Yeah, well, and he continues to. Just last week, Trump asked Putin to turn over any dirt he's got on Hunter Biden to him. I mean, he's still trying to negotiate with this guy.
All of these voters, followers, or supporters of Trump are mentally ill. My theory.
Well, they do have a challenge. I'm not sure that they're mentally ill because there is this syndrome, this brainwashing syndrome. It is possible to brainwash people, and frankly, I think that that's what right-wing media in America is doing. And it's not just Fox News, obviously, but Fox is the biggest.
Well, can I say one other thing? It's where, if somebody actually wants to say they support Trump and they don't support Putin, ask them why. If Trump supports Putin, how come you support Trump?
Well, and Trump is just, promoting the same values that Putin does, which is strongman autocracy and kleptocracy. It's an oligarchy. That's what they're all about. Rob, well said. Thank you very much for the call. Mike in Beaverton, Oregon. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom, a long-time listener, first-time caller.
Well, thank you,
I wanted to talk about e-bikes because that's another way that you could beat fossil fuels.
My wife has one. They're spectacular.
Oh, yeah. So I just bought one a few months ago, and I love it. I can run errands around town, and I can ride into Portland. It has like a 40-mile to 100-mile range, depending on the assist level it uses.
Mm-hmm.
They're just a blast, and it comes with 2 batteries. You can go up to 30 miles an hour. It's just so much fun.
Yeah. I've ridden it, and it's amazing. I mean, you can use the battery boost when you're first taking off, or if you get tired for a while and you just want to coast. Yeah, on hers, you can just kind of go back and forth between pedaling or just letting the battery run it. I'm assuming yours works the same way.
That's correct. You can choose different levels of assist, or you could just use the throttle, and it's so much fun, and it's just like you can go anywhere a bike can go on bike paths, and I would just recommend that to anybody who's looking. And I'm a former motorcycle rider, so it really fills the gap between a bicycle and a motorcycle.
Yeah, Louise bought hers like 10 years ago. She bought it when we lived in D.C., and I don't, excuse me, I don't remember what she paid. But what did yours cost? Forgive my sneezing.
Mine costs $3,500. It's a juiced. It's kind of a moped style bike.
Mm-hmm. That's a pretty good price. That's a lot of money. I don't think that Louise's cost anything close to that, but they're out there. There's a whole spectrum of them, from really fancy to really cheap. Mike, thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for sharing your story with us. It's great to hear from you. We'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. They often say that Republican Senator from Wisconsin, Ron Johnson, is the stupidest guy in the entire United States Senate. I get it. Tommy Tuberville gives him a run for his money, but he just came out with what has to be at least the very stupidest idea of the year. Ron Johnson is proposing, there's a shortage of child care workers right now in America. There's a whole bunch of good reasons for that. But he has proposed a solution. His suggestion: any woman in America who's getting any kind of public assistance, you're getting food stamps, you're getting, tuition relief, whatever it may be, you would be forced to go into daycare centers and care for children. Yeah, seriously. This is Ron Johnson's idea. People who had no training, and one of his assistants said, well, it's just like teachers who teach in public schools where their own kids attend. No, it's not. These are not trained professionals. There's no union. This is nuts. There's a whole video about it over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. Okay, I just have this story just moved me. In the next hour, I'm going to do a bit more of a deep dive into the science of COVID. But Sunnybird, posting over on dailycoz.com, wrote this piece called "As God Is My Witness," and it's really an extraordinary read. And Sunnybird apparently works in a hospital, and it doesn't say if this person is a minister or a nurse. From the way it reads, I would assume probably there as spiritual help, but not sure. But anyhow, this is just an excerpt from the diary. As I said, you can read it at dailycoz.com. It's titled "As God Is My Witness," and I'm quoting. I'm entirely quoting here. One of the last people I sat with was one of those who had drunk every flavor of GQP Kool-Aid. worshiped the Orange Menace and somehow equated Ivanka and Melania as Republican terrestrial agents that were planted with Trump so he could do his godly duty and save the entire planet and the white human race because other races are unworthy of walking on God's planet. Frankly, my skin crawled, and I wanted to leave the room and never go back, but that's not why I'm there. He ranted about the Dems, the traitor Dems, and libs that were destroying the planet. One of the last things he said to me was, quote, "As God, Trump, is my witness, my soul will be avenged for the wrongs done to all of us by the evil demons of hell, the libs and the Dems," end quote. And I'm still quoting from Sonny Bird's diary. He was actually waving his fist in the air, was red-faced and crying. I tried to calm him, but he started coughing and then passed away. He died. He was in end-stage COVID. Okay, this is my editorial comment. So back to the diary. A nurse had stopped in the hallway as he started his rant, witnessing this final moment. She hollered to the nurse nearby and hurried to him. I stood in the corner out of their way so I could make my final statement after he was declared deceased. The nurse looked at me after they both declared him deceased and asked if this was normal. No, it wasn't. His final words were unhinged and hateful. No thoughts of love for his family or friends or happy memories, just cruelty and hate. Now, we're not born this way. You know, this isn't the natural, Thomas Hobbes was wrong. This is not the natural state of humanity. The natural state of humans is to be alive and loving and caring and considerate. You know, what the Russians have done in the suburbs of Kyiv, for example, in Bucha and the other little towns around there, going through and literally raping, murdering. This is not normal. And screaming as you're dying about your political enemies is not normal. People have to be taught to hate. There's all kinds of subtle ways that society does it. You know, we have this whole structure that we generally refer to as white privilege that, you know, you could say is a piece of that. But then there's this media ecosystem that is being cheered on by a right-wing billionaire infrastructure and ecosystem that in order to prevent Americans from having the same kind of health care that, you know, people enjoy all over the world in advanced democracies all around the world, to prevent people from having free education, because these things would raise the taxes on rich people. In order to prevent, you know, pollution control and the electrification of America, because these people make their money selling fossil fuels. They are assisting, supporting, cooperating with, collaborating with, whatever you want to call it, these right-wing outlets that are teaching people to be hateful and fearful. And how is that a good thing? This is not, I mean, you know, when the Constitution was written, there was a discussion about the free press, and we almost lost that. The free press is written into the First Amendment, but in 1798, when John Adams was a one-term president, right in the middle of his presidency, John Adams got pissed off at the newspapers for attacking him, and he passed the Alien Sedition Law. It so offended Jefferson that for the next 2 years, Jefferson was vice president. He refused to come talk with John Adams. He never again met him physically until the day they both died. And the Alien and Sedition Act allowed the president of the United States to shut down newspapers and put their publishers in jail. And he shut down 17 newspapers and jailed over 20 newspaper editors, including Ben Franklin's grandson, Benjamin Franklin Bach, because Bach had written an editorial saying that Adams was old, toothless, querulous, and balding. So we want a free press. We don't want to go back to John Adams. But is this what the founders had in mind? Somehow I don't think so. Now, I'm not calling for limits on the press, but I am saying that I think the rest of the press, what we now refer to as the corporate media, has some kind of an obligation to point out how toxic some of the press within this country have become.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back. What's it going to take to wake people up from peddling hate and fear? What's it going to take? Pick up your calls after the break.
In the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, our book is by Frantz Fanon, and it's The Wretched of the Earth. This is from the chapter on national culture on page 145. It sort of reads like Thomas Paine, actually. Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it in relative opacity. In the underdeveloped countries, preceding generations have simultaneously resisted the insidious agenda of colonialism and paved the way for the emergence of the current struggles. Now that we are in the heat of combat, we must shed the habit of decrying the efforts of our forefathers or feigning incomprehension at their silence or passiveness. They fought as best they could with the weapons they possessed at the time, and if their struggle did not reverberate throughout the international arena, the reason should be attributed not so much to a lack of heroism, but to a fundamentally different international situation. More than one colonized subject had to say, "We've had enough." More than one tribe had to rebel. More than one peasant revolt had to be quelled. More than one demonstration had to be repressed for us to stand firm, certain of our victory. For those of us who are determined to break the back of colonialism, our historic mission is to authorize every revolt, every desperate act, and every attack aborted or drowned in blood. In this chapter, we'll analyze the fundamental issue of the legitimate claim to a nation. The political party that mobilizes the people, however, is little concerned with this issue of legitimacy. Political parties are concerned solely with daily reality, and it is in the name of this reality, in the name of this immediacy which influences the present and future of men and women, that they make their call to action. The political party may very well speak of the nation in emotional terms, but it is primarily interested in getting the people who are listening to understand that they must join in the struggle if they quite simply want to exist. We now know that in the first phase of the national struggle, colonialism attempts to diffuse nationalist demands by manipulating economic doctrine. At the first sign of a dispute, colonialism feigns comprehension by acknowledging with ostentatious humility that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment that requires major social and economic reforms. And it is true that certain spectacular measures, such as the opening of work sites for the unemployed here and there, delay the formation of a national consciousness by a few years. But sooner or later, colonialism realizes it is incapable of achieving a program of socioeconomic reforms that would satisfy the aspirations of the colonized masses. Even when it comes to filling their bellies, colonialism proves to be inherently powerless. The colonial state very quickly discovers that any attempt to disarm the national parties at a purely economic level would be tantamount to practicing in the colonies what it did not want to do in its own territory. And it is no coincidence that today the doctrine of Cartierism is on the rise just about everywhere. Cartier's bitter disillusionment with France's stubborn determination to retain ties with people it will have to feed, whereas so many French citizens are in dire straits, reflects colonialism's inability to transform itself into a nonpartisan aid program. Hence, once again, no need to waste time repeating, better to go hungry with dignity than to eat one's fill in slavery. On the contrary, we must persuade ourselves that colonialism is incapable of procuring for colonized people the material conditions likely to make them forget their quest for dignity. Once colonialism is understood where its social reform tactics would lead it, back come the old reflexes of adding police reinforcements, dispatching troops, and establishing a regime of terror better suited to its interests and its psychology. Within the political parties, or rather parallel to them, we find the cultured class of colonized intellectuals. The recognition of a national culture and its right to exist represent their favorite stomping ground. Whereas the politicians integrate their action in the present, the intellectuals place themselves in the context of history. Faced with the colonized intellectuals' debunking of the colonist theory of a pre-colonial barbarism, colonialism's response is mute. It is especially mute since the ideas put forward by the young colonized intelligentsia are widely accepted by metropolitan specialists. It is in fact now commonly recognized that for several decades, numerous European researchers have widely rehabilitated African, Mexican, and Peruvian civilizations. Some have been surprised by the passion invested by the colonized intellectuals in their defense of a national culture. But those who consider this passion exaggerated are strangely apt to forget that their psyches and their egos are conveniently safeguarded by the French or German culture, whose worth has been proven and which has gone unchallenged. I concede the fact that the actual existence of an Aztec civilization has done little to change the diet of today's Mexican peasant. I concede that whatever proof there is of the once mighty Songhai civilization does not change the fact that the Songhais today are undernourished, illiterate, abandoned to the skies and water, with a blank mind and glazed eyes. But as we have said on several occasions, this passionate quest for a national culture prior to the colonial era can be justified by the colonized intellectuals' shared interest in stepping back and taking a hard look at the Western culture in which they risk becoming ensnared. Fully aware that they're in the process of losing themselves and consequently of being lost to their people, these men work away with raging heart and furious mind to renew contact with their people's oldest inner essence, the furthest removed from colonial times. Let us delve deeper. Perhaps this passion and this rage are nurtured, or at least guided, by the secret hope of discovering, beyond the pleasant wretchedness, beyond the self-hatred, something that redeems us.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So did you hear the story about the three white guys, 20, 22, 24 years old, who just pleaded guilty to trying to attack power grids in 3 different parts of the United States? According to the Justice Department, their scheme was that they were going to bring down electricity for 3 basically major cities or major regions of the United States. And the theory of this program is sort of like what Tim McVeigh was all about back in 1990, I think it was 3, when he blew up the federal building. Their scheme was that doing so, cutting off the power to these cities. Well, this is from the Department of Justice. Quote, the defendants believed their plan would cost the government millions of dollars and cause unrest for Americans in the region. They had conversations about how the possibility of the power being out for months would cause a race war and induce the next Great Depression. They had suicide pills and everything. Why aren't we talking about white terrorism in America? There's a video about this over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. It's 35 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Let's pick up your phone calls. And Rob in Chico, California, it says here that you say that I am lying. What am I lying about?
Yeah, well, you've made the statement that a gas car costs $14 per 100 on your rant, and if you have an electric car, it costs $5 per 100, and if you have solar panels, it's free. I think those were your words.
More or less, yeah.
I have 70 solar panels. I have an electric car, a Kona electric car, Hyundai. Anytime I plug anything in, whether it be my car or anything, I assure you, it is not free. And you know that.
Oh, because you're paying for the infrastructure of the batteries and the solar panels, in other words.
But you're also the grid. All you do when you have solar panels, you send the power back to the grid. And even if I had a surplus of energy that's sent back, I get money back.
Right.
But I plug it in, I get less.
Right.
To say it's free is it's a lie. It's an absolute lie.
Okay, literally, literally, you got me, Rob. You're absolutely right. You do have to pay for those solar panels. My point was that you're cutting out the middlemen. You're not having to pay Saudi Arabia. You're not having to use 265 million-year-old plants to burn in your car, and it seems like free to me.
I agree 100% with you. I have the solar panels. I have an electric car.
You made that point.
I hate paying Saudi Arabia for oil.
Yeah.
Don't sell a falsehood. The electric cars are great. They're fantastic. But they're not free.
All right, so I overstated. Thank you, Rob, for correcting me.
I don't think so.
Paul in Woodinville, Washington. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
I think that was a screwy line of reasoning by the last caller. No,
Paul, you're on the air.
I get it.
Are you? No, you're apparently you don't know you're. Do you know you're on the air, Paul? Apparently not. Charles in Santa Monica, California. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind today?
A couple of things. First of all, I want to plug Danny Sheehan, who, if you're probably familiar, but maybe your guests aren't. He helped Karen Silkwood.
Oh yeah,
he,
back
helped
in the day.
Expose 3 Mile Island.
Was he a lawyer or a journalist?
Contra. A lawyer.
Yeah. Okay.
So and he had this Christic Institute lawsuit that failed, but then he started the Romero Institute. So anyway, he's pushing California 1230, which is a bill in California to move California to zero carbon by 2030, which is all these
7 years, 8 years.
Yeah, it's easy to make pledges, but actually the things that are being done are not going to even meet the things that we need to meet by 2040, 2060. So this is very ambitious, but it is doable, and the bill spells it out. And the other thing he's doing is he's trying to get a racketeering lawsuit going against 6 major oil companies for their knowing obfuscation over the last 50 years about climate change.
Yeah.
It's a fraud been perpetrated on the American public, and that is racketeering going after not just them, but their CEOs and the banks funding them.
That would be great. I mean, Ro Khanna tried to get them to testify before Congress, and they just blew him off.
Yeah, these guys think they have, all the power in the world. I mean,
they do.
And Putin, let me just say one thing about Putin is that, 50% of Russia's income comes from oil. And with climate change, that's going to benefit Russia. It's going to destroy China and the United States. So I don't know where these people think they're going to get off with all this, but it's, we got to turn it around.
Yeah, I'm with you. Charles, by the way, while I still have you, what are the high points of this Assembly Bill 1230 that is going to make California energy independent? What specifically are they proposing to do?
Well, one of the things is getting enough chargers going and making the cost of entry into electric transportation way down,
right?
And scaling up the grid.
I know that they've also required all new house construction in California to have solar panels, if I'm remembering correctly? Or is that part of this legislation?
That could be part of it, too. They're looking for endorsements. If you want to endorse, go to greencal.org.
Green, C-O-W, like moo?
Green.
Oh, Green Cal, C-A-L.
Yeah.
Green Cal. Okay, I got it. Right. Greencal.org. I'll check it out, Charles. Thanks a lot for the call. Jay in Modesto, California. Hey, Jay, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. First of all, I'm a long-term listener, actually. I've gotten some of your books. In fact, I just wanted to tell you that your the Hidden History series does a great job of explaining why things are the way they are in America.
Thank you.
And that was my goal. That's my segue to me asking you this question.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the main problems in the USA, one of the root problems is the education. I mean, a few minutes ago you were talking about how the media misinforms people, and if you look all around, if people have these opinions that are kind of uninformed, and some talk show host somewhere basically has put these opinions in their heads, and then they run around with it. Whereas if they were taught how to think, taught how to think, then they would actually kind of get to the bottom of, okay, they told me this. Is this real? Am I gonna, where does this fit? Have this, I mean, so that's why I look. I mean,
I trace this back, Jay, to the 1980s. We had in the 1950s, largely as a result of Dwight Eisenhower. I was a little kid. I remember when this happened in 1956, as I recall. Maybe it was 57. I was 6 or 7 years old or thereabouts, and Sputnik went up. And I remember going out in the backyard with my dad and watching this little star move slowly across the sky. It was Sputnik. You could hear it on a shortwave radio going ping, ping, ping. And Eisenhower was president, the Republican, and he was nuts. He went nuts about it. And he started programs all across the United States, building schools and trying to identify gifted students. And I was fortunate. I was one of those kids that got targeted for special education, identifying gifted students to try to help them, fulfill their potential, as it were, because we needed a generation of scientists because we were behind in the space race. And so between the 1950s, the mid-1950s, and the early 1980s, America ended up with all these brand new schools. I mean, literally over 40,000 brand new schools all across the United States, if I'm remembering my numbers right. It's in one of my op-eds from last week. And the best education system in the world. And then came along Ronald Reagan. And Sean, I'm going to play this out of the 360. Ronald Reagan put a guy in charge of the Department of Education, Bill Bennett. And the problem that we have right now is that education is being used specifically to target minorities. I mean, this is the whole don't say gay bill down in Florida is all about this. And the Republicans think they're going to ride this to victory. This, by the way, was Viktor Orban's. Viktor Orban had two main sales pitches. One is that liberals in the schools are trying to turn your children into homosexuals. And the other was that refugees from Syria are Muslims and they have brown skin and they're going to pollute our country. And he just got reelected on these two sales pitches. And so Reagan puts a guy...
race theory also.
Yeah, well, it's just a variation on that. And so Reagan puts a guy in charge of the education department. And suddenly education in the United States, we're no longer funding. In fact, in the 80s, we stopped funding programs for gifted kids pretty much altogether. And, which just makes no sense to me at all. But this is Bill Bennett. And by the way, he's still around and he still defends this position. This is Reagan's Secretary of Education explaining to you where crime comes from in America.
But I do know that it's true that if you wanted to reduce crime, you could, if that were your sole purpose, you could abort every black baby in this country and your crime rate would go down. That would be an impossible, ridiculous, and morally reprehensible thing to do. But your crime rate would go down.
So when that guy's put in charge of our education, is it any surprise that 40 years later we've got education that's basically targeting minorities, racial and gender?
I think I've got a topic for your next book, The Secret History of Education.
The Hidden History of Education. I'm with you. Jay, thank you for the call. Thanks for listening to us on SiriusXM. It is coming up on 45 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where smart people get their news. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Apparently, breaking news, there's another mass shooting in California. We only get about a dozen a week of these things. And welcome back. Earl in Hyde Park, Illinois. Earl, I got somebody, I think it was on Twitter, sent me a note going, there is no Hyde Park, Illinois. It's a suburb of Chicago, or it's a neighborhood, or whatever. Is that true?
Okay. All right, it's a neighborhood in Chicago. And what happened is Chicago's broken up in all kinds of neighborhoods. And, we self-identify by these local neighborhoods.
I totally get it, and it's fine with me. I just wanted to say that on the air so that person will stop harassing me every time I say, Earl in Hyde Park, you're on the air. So what's up, Earl?
Yeah, no, there's a gazillion neighborhoods in Chicago that self-identify, but they are within the Chicago city limits. And so, quite frankly, I don't know what he was talking about.
Yeah, he was a pedant.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to say what I'm going to agree with you is that we both are saying the same thing, but I'm going to say it differently. I'm going to say that we've always known for a long time that if it bleeds, it leads, okay, in the news cycle. And what I'm saying is that Fox News has always been negative, just like if it bleeds, it leads. So it's a literal application of negative news that has tended to bring our country from a left-leaning country to a right-leaning country, I believe. And that's why our news cycles follows what the narrative that's coming out of Fox News and ONA and all the other programs that are on right-wing talk radio. We have a system here that I think that the left is intellectually lazy. They lean onto whatever.
Earl, if I may, in the 1980s, Lee Atwater, the guy who designed the Willie Horton ads for George Herbert Walker Bush, came up with this notion that basically that the Republicans need to quote work the refs. And the refs, the referees, and in sports you try to do this. You try to get the referee to see things your way, as it were. And the refs in American politics are the news media. And so there was a program started within the GOP and within the right-wing, ecosphere, as it were, information space, to try to manipulate the media. And a huge part of that, and this was really spearheaded by Rush Limbaugh for years and years and years, was to convince Americans and the media itself that the media was inherently liberal. And therefore, it needed to bend over backwards to have both sides, which is BS. But back to you, Earl.
All right. Thank you very much. And I completely agree with you. And they did, I'm sorry to say, when the information war from the standpoint that they have brought United States from left-leaning programs that would help the greater bulk of the American people to, like you said, the attitude where right-wing leaning, gazillionaires and people who want to be gazillionaires follow that mantra. And like you said often on your program, that if you're white, okay, you are better off poor than if you're a black man. So I hear the music, I'm gonna jump out.
I got it. No, thank you, Earl. Spot on. And it's a problem. It's a real problem. This effort by the media to always show both sides. On one of the shows this weekend, it was like, well, how's President Biden doing? Let's ask a Republican governor. Really? Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. 27 Republican senators sent a letter to the Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm, echoing talking points that the American Petroleum Institute pushed out on Twitter recently, saying that basically if we're going to stop importing Russian oil into the United States, which, by the way, the Russian oil imports into the U.S. are just a trickle. It's just a tiny drop in the bucket. If we're going to stop doing that, we need to, and these are some quotes from the API Twitter, we need to unleash America's energy. We need to release permits for energy development on federal lands. We need to issue offshore leasing plans for the next 5 years. We need to accelerate energy permitting infrastructure. We need to reduce regulatory and legal uncertainty. Right. It's a scam. And these 27 Republican senators are owned by the big fossil fuel companies because the Supreme Court allowed it with their Citizens United decision. We have to do something about this. There's a whole video rant about it over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. Welcome back. 51 minutes past the hour here. And Jim in Honesdale, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Hi. How you doing?
Good. What's up?
You had a book. I haven't listened to your show for quite some time, but you used to push a book that was by John Perkins, Confession of an Economic Hitman.
Yeah, I know John.
And, oh, do you? Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't think anybody was listening to that book because that's a great book. And
just so people know what we're talking about here, Jim, he wrote it about 15, 20 years ago. And basically it was the story of when he worked as a consultant to third world countries on behalf of big corporations, and basically told them, spin your country to the right, get tough with people, with the military, do what the big companies want. And if the politicians didn't go along, he would engineer a coup to overthrow them. Back to you.
Well, absolutely, and I can see that happening in Pakistan as we speak. And I think John Perkins should have an update, and he could bring another book out and have it, what's happened in the last 20 years. Yeah. And I see Pakistan's in a mess with exactly what he's talking about, with our West influence to overthrow these countries. And I've been watching this last 20 years, and we have overthrown, and it doesn't matter whether democracy or what they are, we have overthrown about 56 countries, and we have taken this banking system and the SWIFT fund to a new level of literally taking over the world. And everything is a spider web of the SWIFT fund. Just the way we put $500 billion we confiscated on the central bank.
Well, SWIFT isn't. I realize that Putin right now is thinking that SWIFT is the origin of all evil, but all it is a system. In fact, I believe it was originally set up by a bunch of banks. But it's morphed into an international system. It's a system for clearing transactions. And also taking over 56 countries since John Perkins wrote that book. Well, I'm not sure about that. Louise and I bought a house last year, and I had to transfer money from my bank to the buyer, right. And I had to give them the SWIFT number of my bank. That's all. It's an electronic funds transfer system. Now, blocking the transfer of electronic funds. I understand what it is, but it also involves a lot of arm twisting.
Look at when the truckers couldn't even go into their banks up in Canada, and they couldn't even make payments on their homes.
I don't believe that the SWIFT system was used against the truckers. Jim, I think you've been drinking some weird right-wing Kool-Aid here. But, maybe not. But that's my sense of it. Abby in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Hey, Abby, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. You tweeted this morning that the best thing somebody can do to stop global warming, paraphrasing here, is to get an electric car. I suggest that's not the best thing. The best thing would be to have no car at all. Sure. We haven't owned a car for 18 years. I think the best thing somebody can do is to move someplace where they don't need a car. And I did a lot of research on this. I did a presentation in Portland at a World Car Free Conference in 2008 about it, called Transportation Liberation. Basically, the three-legged stool is walking, riding a bike, or using public transit. It takes a lot of coal to make the metals to build a car. The lithium shortage is going to be a real thing real soon. The infrastructure for highways, for parking, on and on and on.
I'm completely with you, Abby. The first 2 or 3 years that Louise and I lived in Washington, D.C., we did not have a car. We sold our car when we left Portland, and finally, I think it was in the third year we were there, we bought a little tiny car, like a skateboard on wheels. But because they have a great mass transit system, we could walk to the metro.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I think electric cars are a step in the right direction. A lot of people have gotten mortgages on their houses in the suburbs. They can't just sell them and move to the city and so on, and talk the transit company into bringing buses out there. So I think it's a kind of a bridge, but I think the ultimate solution is to not have privately owned cars that we all,
we're seeing movement in this direction.
We rent one. Happens 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah, we're seeing movement in this direction, and it's taking a bunch of different forms. Number one, you've got mass transit, which is growing. Number two, you've got people working from home, telecommuting, and thanks to the pandemic, that's become a thing, and it's becoming a very big thing, and that reduces our reliance on cars. And I think generally speaking, people are getting it that relying on cars all the time is just not a good thing. But we've got to reconfigure our cities. And people living in rural areas have it really tough. Oh, and the third thing that people are using now, the delivery services have gotten really efficient. Where they're using computer algorithms to figure out if they're going to deliver groceries to you, for example. First go to this house, then go to this house, then go to this house. So the amount of fuel that is spent
getting groceries to your home is radically less if you use a delivery service than if you just drive to the store yourself. So, all these things, together, but point well taken. Abhi, thanks a lot for the call. We will be right back. I want to get into the values and systems that make Finland the happiest country in the world and a geeky science about what's going on with COVID and diabetes. This is truly amazing stuff. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The hidden history of Big Brother in America, how the death of privacy and the rise of surveillance threaten us and our democracy, by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects, too, including cutting-edge science reports at HartmannReport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at Dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
Our book for the book report today is Taking Bullets, Terrorism and Black Life in 21st Century America, Confronting White Nationalism, Supremacy, Privilege, Plutocracy, and Oligarchy, a Poet's Representation and Challenge, by Haki R. Madhuburi. He writes, this is from the chapter, page 27, the chapter Terror in the Midst of Prayer and Empire. In our perpetual state of national mourning, where our eyes are watered out and our hearts cease to heal at the rate the Creator meant them to, we hold hands in profound silence as we remember the Mother Emanuel 9 of Charleston, South Carolina, those 9 mothers, fathers, sisters, and brothers. Even before burying, before black earth covered their caskets, too many ministers, media pundits, and plain white and black folks downgraded the terror that quickened their deaths of our finest in this land to the mental illness and race hatred, in quotes, of a single young white man. He may have acted alone, but he was not alone in his thinking, encouragement, gathering of arms, warped consciousness, confirmation, or ahistorical views, and yeses from the millions in the nation who proudly wear and display the Confederate flag above their hearts and fly it in all of its traitorous glory over a state capitol and other institutions. Again, we find ourselves at war with history and culture, entertaining another call for a national conversation on race and a president weary of trying to make sense of and comfort the grief-stricken nation with words from the highest office of the land. This was written while Obama was president. These are the facts, not an opinion or the ignorant ranting of compromised preachers and television pundits. A 21-year-old white man, a citizen of South Carolina, walked into the sacred and spiritual home of the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church of Charleston, the historic home of black liberation fighter Denmark Vesey, and fatally killed 9 of its members, including the pastor, during Bible study. This was a pure act of domestic terrorism. A modern-day lynching by a young white nationalist who coolly and calmly assassinated 9 black members of Mother Emanuel. Domestic violence and acts of terrorism are on the rise in the United States, as detailed by Charles Kurzman and Daniel Schanzer in their New York Times op-ed, The Other Threat, where they state that, quote, the main terrorist threat in the United States is not from violent Muslim extremists, but from right-wing extremists, end quote. In their national research, local police agencies across the country identified, quote, the militias, neo-Nazis, and sovereign citizens as the major threat the nation faces in regard to extremism, end quote. All of this is homegrown with international connections. Morris Dees and J. Richard Cohen of the Southern Poverty Law Center also writes in the New York Times article, Racists Without Borders, that, quote, Americans tend to view attacks like the mass murder in Charleston as isolated hate crimes, the work of a deranged racist or a group of zealots lashing out in anger unconnected to a broader movement. This view we can no longer afford to indulge. When, according to survivors, Mr. Roof told the victims at the prayer meeting that black people were, quote, taking over the country, he was expressing sentiments that unite white nationalists from the United States and Canada to Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. Unlike those of the civil rights era, whose main goal was to maintain Jim Crow in the American South, today's white supremacists don't see borders. They see a white tribe under attack by people of color across the globe. The end of white rule in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, and South Africa, they believe, foreshadowed an apocalyptic future for all white people, a white genocide that must be stopped before it's too late. End of quote. The internationalization of terrorism is not a foreign theory in today's social media world. Dees and Cohen will be speaking at a conference in Budapest about this transnational white supremacism that is emerging as the world grows more connected technologically. The message of white genocide is spreading. Also, David J. Whitaker's Terrorism, Understanding the Global Threat, gives another view. Clearly, our rush to forgive this mass murderer within 96 hours of this supreme tragedy is misguided, anti-human, and does not allow for properly grieving the fallen. As perfectly scripted, displaying the permanent effectiveness of Christian acculturation on the Sunday, June 21st, 2015 morning services of Mother Emanuel Church, the black Christians out-Christianed their white brothers and sisters. Before the morning sermon, the presiding elder, Reverend Norvell Goff Sr., found it necessary to thank the local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies for doing their job. He also stated, quote, a lot of folks expected us to do something strange and break out in a riot. Well, they just don't know us. We are people of faith, end quote. I find this statement inappropriate, insensitive, and ahistorical, implying, whether he meant it or not, that the recent uprising and rebellions in Ferguson, New York, Cleveland, and other parts of the nation were riots and did not include black people of faith, and that somehow they were strange in their social, political, and economic activism. Informed people do not riot against injustice or white terrorism. They study, organize, and strategically struggle at all levels, in the streets, on the campus, in front of the White House, and in corporate boardrooms. Dylan Roof his stated intentions were to start a race war, and informed black leadership understands that we cannot pray this away or appeal to any law enforcement agency that all across the country, including Charleston, has been seriously compromised. To label black reaction to murder, terrorism, deep unemployment, substandard housing, etc., as riot is to blame the victim. The book, Taking Bullets.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. 6 minutes after the hour. Well, it's the beginning of the third hour. Welcome back to our third hour. And Finland. Let's talk about Finland. Actually, Finland is kind of emblematic of Scandinavia in general. But they've been named the happiest country in the world now for, 6, 7 years in a row? Before that, it was Denmark. In fact, the last time Denmark got named the happiest country in the world, Louise and I went to Denmark and did our show from there for a week or two. And it was an absolutely fascinating experience. And, it's Finland kind of the same thing. So should Finland show us our future? We in the United States, being informed by, right-wing media and conservatives, as it were, across the board, have had this notion, and it really got sold to us in a big way in the 80s with Ronald Reagan, who played, a cowboy on TV and in films and played a cowboy as president, too. Although he, in any case, George W. Bush tried the same little trick, you'll recall. He bought a ranch. Remember when he decided he was going to run for president in 1999, George W. Bush moved out of his luxury mansion and into a pig farm down in Crawford, Texas, that they re-outfitted to be a ranch, except that there were no horses because George W. Bush is afraid of horses. But nonetheless, he was like, yes, it's the cowboy ethic. Yeah, I'm going to go out and clear brush, is what he liked to do, yeah. And we got this whoever dies with the most toys wins kind of mentality. During the Reagan era, there was this celebration of great wealth. Remember the movie Wall Street with Michael Douglas? And, greed is good, my friends, it's good. Everything is driven by greed. Well, this is the mantra. This was the Milton Friedman mantra. This is the core essential belief system of what you refer to as neoliberalism. The idea that money kind of drives everything. There's also a religious aspect to this. That in the United States, we have arguably adopted a form of Christianity that Jesus would not recognize. It's a variation on Calvinism, or on what took over Calvinism after John Calvin died, which is the idea that, everybody's a sinner and your destiny is determined before you are born. Calvinists believe in predestination. It was one of John Calvin's, principles. And so even before you're born, God has figured out who are the good people and who are the bad people. And somehow God has to communicate to us who the good people are so that we can put them in charge of things. Because you only want people running your country who God has blessed, right? And so the theory that the Calvinists came up with, no surprise that Betsy DeVos and her family are Calvinists, as far as I know, is that the richer you are, the more God has blessed you. And so we've got this whole kind of religion. This is seeped into the Protestant, the so-called Protestant ethic. It's the evangelical church has become just basically all about this. Back in the 80s, when this first emerged as a big way beyond Calvinism, it was called the prosperity gospel. And there have been, attempts to pitch it into the black community, into the white community. It's just right across the board. Just believe in Jesus and you'll get rich. Except that Jesus said the opposite. He said, rich people are not going to make it into the kingdom of heaven. It's easier for a camel to go through an eye of a needle. But this is this system. Whoever dies with the most toys wins. Greed is good. God loves you if you're rich, and we should all put rich people in charge of everything because that's proof that that's what God wants. This has seized America. It has not seized Finland. First of all, most of Scandinavia is very secular. Churches are principally, there are still some people who go to church, but mostly they're used for ceremonial purposes, for weddings and for bar mitzvahs and confirmations and events, as it were. Instead, the religion is one of we're here for each other. I would argue that they're actually practicing what Jesus preached rather than preaching what, in America we're practicing, which is the greed is good thing. And, a great summary of this over at Daily Kos by Dan Kay. He's quoting Lisa Hattinen, who is a communications coordinator for the city of Espoo. Espoo is a small town just outside of Helsinki. And they asked her, okay, Lisi, L-I-I-S-I. Okay, Lisi, how is it that Finland is the happiest country in the world? What is that? I mean, you've got lousy winters. They last forever. You got, what was the old joke we used to have? We used to say when we lived in Vermont, you've got 9 months of winter and 3 months of bad sledding. So it's dark, it's cold. How can you be the happiest people in the world? And she answered, everybody has access to the basics. Now let that sink in for a minute as you drive down the street and pass all these homeless people who don't have housing. Or as you go to the store and you see people, literally stealing food and walking out with it because they don't have food. Or as you read the statistics about how America has the shortest lifespan in the entire developed world because tens of millions of Americans have no access to health care at all. They outside of an emergency room, and you only go there long after that cancer has now, grown to the point where it's causing you to bleed out. Or they do have insurance, but hey, it's got a $5,000 deductible, and who's got $5,000? She says these programs are well thought out and they work, so that's the basic foundation for you to be happy. In Finland, you can go to college for free. Your health care is covered. It's like housing is actually a right in most of Scandinavia. I'm not certain if it is in Finland. It is in Denmark. One of the things I learned from when I was there. So how different would America be if Franklin Roosevelt's Four Freedoms or his second sales pitch at the second Bill of Rights, actually, is not the Four Freedoms, his second Bill of Rights, which he proposed the year that he died, as I recall. We were still in the war when he proposed this. He was like, okay, we're still in the war, but we need to get ready for this. And the second Bill of Rights is that, everybody has a right to housing. Everybody has a right to a job that pays well. Everybody has a right to health care. Everybody has a right to food. Everybody has a right to the essentials, which is what she's talking about in Finland. How different would America be if we did that? Well, first of all, in order to pay for that, we would probably have fewer billionaires. Instead of being worth 10, 20, 30, 50, $100 billion, our really rich people would be worth $1 or $2 billion or, $300 million or $500 million. That would be probably one of the biggest and most conspicuous changes. Secondly, we wouldn't have homeless people all over our streets. We would see our average lifespan go up to that of other developed countries, like Canada, for goodness sake. How different would America be? Now, the one thing that's most fascinating about this argument that I'm making, that we need to adopt what the Northern Europeans have done for years and years and years, because it's working for them. And by the way, they're doing this because they took Harry Truman's advice after the end of World War II. He couldn't get these things passed here in the United States. So he pushed Europe to adopt free education, free health care, just basic, the right to unionize, absolute right to unionize. Many of these countries have 90% unionization rates. The one argument that I get, and I've been doing this show for 19 years, and whenever I bring this stuff up, some white guy will invariably call in and say, yeah, but the difference between Finland and the United States is that there's not that many black people in Finland, or brown people, or people that don't look like Finns. As if everybody looking the same in the country means that the country's going to be prosperous, which is the sales pitch that white supremacists have to offer us. The fact of the matter is that, the United States is more diverse than Finland. So why don't we have a higher standard of living in those diverse communities? Because of racism. You've got the causation backwards. It's not that diversity causes countries to end up as oligarchies with rich people and a lot of poor people. It's that oligarchies use race to divide people and to justify having a permanent underclass based on race. So spare me the objection that, oh yeah, well, in Finland you've got a homogenous society. We're a more heterogeneous society. Come on, that's BS. I'm not buying that. That's just a matter of taxing the rich. And welcome back. Alan in Seattle. Hey, Alan. Thanks for listening to KBCS. What's on your mind today?
Oh, well, I thought you were agreeing with Trump in kind about your rant on the media, because he famously said the media or the press is the enemy of the people.
Well, he and I were speaking of very different things. Trump was arguing that a free press is the enemy of oligarchy, basically. And what I'm saying is that our press is not free. We need to break up the big media monopolies.
Well, yes, but you're approaching the same statement from different perspectives.
For different reasons.
He was trying to say that the free press was talking openly about his lies. The first time, I think.
But Trump's solution was to change the libel laws so that people like him who feel like they're being treated unfairly by the press can sue them. And my solution is to expand the press, is to have more media outlets. We've gone from 40 or 50,000 independent newspapers in the United States when Reagan came into office. I mean, there's literally 40 or 50,000 of them, down to a few hundred.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a good system.
Consolidation of the media is a really bad thing.
Yeah. So that's my point, and Donald Trump would not agree with that. He does not want 1,000
interestingly enough, very, very quickly, the infrastructure bill that is going to help provide high-speed internet to the rural areas should be a warning shot across the right-wing media bow, because suddenly these people will have access to something other than right-wing radio.
Yeah, but here's where you get to the problem, which I was describing earlier in my piece about electric vehicles and energy prices and things like that, is that when you try to look for information on the internet, now maybe, I realize that, I'm not sure if DuckDuckGo does it, but Google certainly tailors your search, requirements to what they think you want. But for some reason, whenever I search, when I was writing this article yesterday, and I was searching for, gas versus electric cars, for example. Everything that was coming up, or most of what was coming up, was right-wing websites. Now, somebody tweeted me a screenshot saying that, I'm not getting all right-wing websites, and I think that's fascinating. Maybe it was just a matter of plugging in a different question. But the point is that the right wing has been, for years and years, investing a small fortune in building out a right-wing infrastructure on the internet. And so, bringing broadband into everybody's home, I don't think it's going to be any kind of panacea.
Well, then that speaks to your point of education and critical thinking. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Tom.
I'm with you. Thank you, Alan. And that's where Bill Bennett did so much damage to America. It's where, and not just Bill Bennett. I mean, the whole Republican thing. And surprise, surprise, Betsy DeVos is funding Ron DeSantis, and Ron DeSantis is going after public education, and Ron DeSantis is supporting charter schools and private Christian academies, all white Christian academies. And it's like a dog chasing its tail kind of thing. Well, maybe that's the wrong metaphor. It's a system that feeds itself, basically. Anyhow, we'll continue with the news of the day, and I got to tell you about this COVID news right after this break, and then I'll pick up your phone call. So stick around. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So how do you know which party has the most crooks in it? The Republicans are always saying, oh, those Democrats are soft on crime and, a lot of murders in Democrat-run cities. Well, for the record, first off, red states and red counties have a higher per capita murder rates than do blue states and blue counties. This is just a fact. But secondly, let's look at some of the administrations. I mean, the Obama administration had no criminal indictments. The Jimmy Carter administration had 1. The Bill Clinton administration had 2. But what about the Republican administrations? It was 16 for George W. Bush. It was 26 criminal indictments for Ronald Reagan. Richard Nixon's administration had 76 criminal indictments. And of course, the full-time professional rapist and grifter, Donald Trump, he had 215 criminal indictments. So who's really soft on crime? We got a video about it over at ThomHartmann.com. You can check it out. So COVID news here. This is just extraordinary. This is the first controlled investigation of COVID on humans, and it was just published last week in the journal Nature. And what they found, and this is where they purposely, intentionally infected people with COVID. Volunteers. These were young people. They were 18 to 36 years old. So they weren't, and they had no comorbidities or other conditions that would put them at risk. And they volunteered for this program. And what they found was a couple of things that I want to just share with you as data points, and then I'll get to the next story that goes along with this. Number one, they found that one single airborne droplet that can be expelled by a person speaking in your presence, or obviously sneezing or coughing. But just one single airborne droplet getting into your nose, the nose is the principal point of entry for COVID, or your mouth if you're breathing through your mouth. One single droplet is all it takes to get you COVID, number one, which means that wear a mask, whether you have it or whether you're afraid of getting it, number one. Number two, that viral shedding and transmissibility occur at really, really high levels, whether your symptoms are severe, whether your symptoms are mild, whether your symptoms are moderate, or whether you have no symptoms at all, but you are still infected. You're still releasing roughly the same number of viruses. The symptoms indicate how bad, how heavily, how strong your body is reacting to it, not how many billions of viruses are in your body, or trillions. It's at highest levels in the nose and throat, once again emphasizing the need for a mask. And virus was recoverable from the nose up to 10 days after inoculation on average. So fascinating, number one. And number two, this piece in the New York Times today, COVID and diabetes colliding in public health train wreck. 30 to 40% of all coronavirus deaths in the United States have occurred among people with diabetes. And it turns out that diabetes impairs the immune system. Now, most people who have type 2 diabetes also have other underlying conditions like high blood pressure or obesity. And what they found when they looked at, which are also problems for COVID, but it looks like it's the diabetes that is the thing that's driving it. And those conditions are driving the diabetes. Diabetes patients, hospitals, this is from the New York Times, with COVID spend more time in the ICU, more likely to be intubated, less likely to survive. 20% of hospitalized coronavirus patients with diabetes died within a month of admission. 13% of all adults, 34 million Americans, are diabetic or already diagnosed. And then on top of this, we've got legislation to reduce the price of diabetes medication, insulin, down to $35 a month maximum. It costs pennies to make. It can cost $1,000 a month or more right now because of price gouging. And who's blocking that? The Republicans. Doctors have also reported a sharp rise in young people being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And this seems to track the childhood obesity epidemic that we've got. 42% of adults with diabetes now, 42% of adults are now obese in America. And this puts them at risk for diabetes, which puts you at risk for COVID. So all reasons for us to figure out ways to, number one, treat diabetes effectively, number two, to avoid it happening, and number three, to avoid COVID at all costs, diabetic or not.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back 27 minutes past the hour. Pick up your calls on the other side of this.
Today we're reading from Behold America by Sarah Churchwell, The Entangled History of America First and the American Dream. This is from the prologue. On Monday, 30 May 1927, a cool day with showers forecast, New Yorkers were gathering for the annual Memorial Day parades around the city. It was only 9 years since the end of the European War, into which America had been so reluctantly drawn and Europe had suddenly become closer than ever before. Precisely 10 days earlier, Charles Lindbergh had completed the first solo flight across the Atlantic in the spirit of St. Louis, and no one had yet stopped celebrating. Front pages around the country reported that Lucky Lindy had been mobbed in London, greeted by rapturous crowds of 150,000. Few Americans were talking about much else than the newest national hero, but in New York that day, different kinds of mobs were about to gather. Around 8 a.m., a group of Italian immigrants living in the Bronx set out for the elevated train on their way to Manhattan to join the parade. But they were not going to honor the American soldiers who had died in the service of their country. They were supporters of Mussolini, planning to join 400 American fascists who were marching in Manhattan's Memorial Day parade as part of the official fascist movement in the United States. They had been invited by the parade's organizers, to the outrage of many anti-fascists, including Italian nationalists and anarchists who threatened violence if the invitation wasn't rescinded. It wasn't. Like all his fellow fascists intending to march that day, Joseph Carisi was wearing the black shirt uniform, sporting leather boots, jodhpurs, a black cap, and carrying a steel-tipped riding crop. When he stopped to buy a newspaper, Carisi was jumped by two men, stabbed in the neck, and left to die on the sidewalk. Another fascist, Nicholas Amoroso, who was running either to catch up with his group or away from the killers, reports vary, was shot 4 times, once right through the heart. One of the 2 murdered men had served in the American Army during the Great War. The other with the Italian Army, papers reported. The parade they had meant to join took place without them, a fascist delegation of several hundred that was guarded by police to, quote, avert disorder. After the parade, the American blackshirts returned to their headquarters in the heart of Times Square. There, another of the fascists standing outside was set upon by 3 men. He defended himself with his riding crop as his fellow blackshirts charged out, brandishing clubs and whips, chasing the assailant through the theater traffic in Times Square, who fled as the black-shirted mob tore through the traffic. 100 fascists, reported the New York Times, rushed the attackers. A melee ensued that was quickly dispersed by the police. There was also violence in Brooklyn, where a parade of fascisti marched from the Angelo Rizza Fascista League at 274 Troutman Street in Bushwick. The LA Times reported several hundred men were parading, including 40 or 50 in the black shirt uniform. Fights broke out between supporters and protesters mingling on the sidewalks, and an anti-fascist was found lying on the ground, stabbed in the back. He survived and identified a fascist as his assailant. Accompanied by 30 police reserves to forestall violence, the marchers made their way through Brooklyn, stopping at the Wilson Avenue station, where the fascisti came to attention and gave the fascist salute. They ended at a Roman Catholic church, where the priest blessed them under large American and Italian flags, while the police remained on guard. The biggest outbreak of violence that Memorial Day, however, occurred in Queens, where it centered around a different right-wing group, not Italian Americans, but the self-proclaimed 100% American kind. By 1927, the Ku Klux Klan had spread across the United States since its rebirth in Georgia 12 years earlier. The first Klan was formed in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, as former Confederate soldiers in Tennessee created a secret society to promote white supremacism, and terrorize the newly freed slaves in the South during the Reconstruction era. The name is generally believed to have originated from the Greek word for circle, kuklos, while Klan pays homage to the mystified Celtic heritage supposedly shared by white Southerners. Within a decade or two, the first Klan had been successfully suppressed by law enforcement and died out by the turn of the century. But in 1915, it was resuscitated in Georgia, and by the early 1920s, the second Klan had achieved a powerful political presence in the United States, not only in the South, but across the country. I would add this is because of 1915, the movie Birth of a Nation came out. The Klan had an active presence in New York City and Long Island by 1927, with favorite slogans, which they even attempted to copyright at various points. That year, the Klan was calling attention to the fact that it first announced the program of 100% Americanism and of America First. They were not, in fact, the first to adopt these mottos, as this book will show. In 1927, both phrases had been around for a decade or more. But as far as the Klan busily copywriting hate was concerned, America First belonged to them. And on Memorial Day in Queens, 1,000 or so of them had gathered to march, many in white robes and hoods. They were accompanied by 400 women from the so-called Clavana, the feminine branch of the Klan. Some of the reported 20,000 spectators in Queens that day objected to the Klan's presence, as others defended their right to march. Scuffles broke out, and it turned into a riot. Women fought women, and spectators fought the policemen and the Klansmen as their desire dictated, said a newspaper. Klan banners were shredded, and 5 of their number were arrested, said initial reports, while a few others were caught up in the confusion as well. The book, Behold America, Sarah Churchwell. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program.
An amazing story out of New Hampshire. The state legislature, this was after in Virginia, the new governor, Glenn Youngkin, who ran as I'm not Donald Trump, and then immediately put up a tip line for parents to turn in their, for parents to report their kids' teachers if they say something subversive. Now in New Hampshire, they've got a law that prohibits the dissemination of certain divisive concepts related to sex and race. Those divisive concepts being that people could be unconsciously racist. A conservative moms group has put up a $500 bounty in New Hampshire for the first person who could destroy the reputation and career of a teacher using this new law. So the teachers union sued the state of New Hampshire, and now the Republicans in New Hampshire, who control the state, are fighting back by putting up a new law that is going to require teachers to take a loyalty oath and ban any, quote, any negative account or representation of the founding and history of the U.S. It's nuts. There's a video about it over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. Let's pick up your phone calls here on this remarkable day. Florindo in Fairfield, Iowa. I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name.
No, that's right. Thanks, Tom, for taking my call. I just want to revert back to what you were talking about earlier in the show about why are the news media dissing Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
The Chomsky-Herman analysis of that would be a rebuttal to what Reagan and Newt Gingrich used to say. Then the media are so liberal because the reporters all vote Democratic.
Right, not all, but yeah, a majority of voters. Yeah. But that's true of all people who have a college education.
Right, but Chomsky thought that was idiotic and said that if that were the case, then the people who work on the assembly lines in auto manufacturing would be deciding what kind of cars they're building. But
that's interesting.
Yeah, but the point is, the reason you said it. The reason that the media dissed Joe Biden is because didn't he just submit a wealth tax plan?
Yes. Yes. And who owns the media? Very rich people.
Yeah, exactly. Rupert Murdoch and Jeff Bezos, etc.
Yeah, yeah. So surprise, surprise. Yeah, I'm with you, Florindo. I think you've nailed it. I think you've absolutely nailed it. Thank you very much. Randall in Minneapolis. Hey, Randall, thanks for listening to AM 950. What's up?
Thank you, Tom. We go back to John Kennedy, and I've watched all the Republicans and all that's gone on since Nixon, and I learned I have a philosophy in life: accept life on its terms, moderation, and gratitude. And while I'm in this moderate road that I've been living for the last 20 years, trying to stay moderate, I'm thinking, no. Today, now is the time for all or nothing. This is what the Republicans are doing. They're throwing everything out there And I'm thinking, okay, they want to do the lies. They want to do all this non-factual flying with everything they have control over. Then we just need to stand united. They want divided. We want united. They want war. We want peace. They want fear. We want courage. It's all black and white anymore. Let's go. Let's just split the parties. Let's go with the Dems. Let's go with the love, the peace, the honor, the courage, the wisdom, the understanding. Let's go with the positive, period. They're all negative, we're going positive. And that's the name of the tune.
Randall, I'm sorry.
In this time.
Yeah, when I started this program back, almost 20 years ago, Louise and I were looking for a slogan. How do we identify ourselves? What is it that we're really about, and what is it that we're preaching? And what we came up with was that we were the voice of the radical middle. And from 2003 until probably, I don't know, maybe 2008, 2009, that was my pitch. It was like, I'm the voice, I'm the moderate voice here. The vast majority of Americans want Social Security and Medicare strengthened. The vast majority of Americans want something like a Medicare for All program like Canada has. The vast majority of Americans want low cost or free education. The vast majority of Americans think that it's a crime that millions of Americans go to sleep hungry, that millions of American children go to sleep hungry. The vast majority of Americans think it's a crime that the diseases of malnutrition are so widespread in our country. We've got the highest rate of hookworm infections in the developed world in the United States, mostly in the South, in Mississippi and Alabama. I mean, it's like, I think that a moderate position is where Bernie Sanders has been all these years. The far left position is, let's go communist. That's far left. Let's have the government take over all these businesses and run them, for the benefit of the people. And I think you could probably make a case about, extractive industries in that regard. But setting that aside, I'm not there at all. I mean, I'm way to the right of that, as it were, thinking that, capitalism can work and can do good things when it's well regulated. So I'm with you, Randall, but I don't think that you have to shift from being a moderate to being some kind of radical. I think that a genuine moderate has, what's happened is that the radicals have taken over the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Amen. Thank you. Appreciate the call. Michael in Princeton, Minnesota. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Yeah, Tom, I just wanted to call with a bunch of information on the solar that you were talking about and encourage younger people to get into it sooner. I'm 75 years old. I decided I was going to try to go solar about 2 years ago. I was dealing with a very, very reputable company here in the state of Minnesota, and the prices just kind of kept going up. We wound up at a price with about 26 panels at $40,000. So you get a 26% discount on that, plus $2,700 on bulk buy, or a group buy, they call it. Mm-hmm. And it increases your property values by about 6%. Okay, so you've got a big gap in between, and at my age, at 75 years old, you wind up spending your money and stuff on your medical and so on. So I'm encouraging these people to do it when they're younger.
Right.
Our roof line also is not big enough to put enough panels on to do us much good. So we have 7 acres out and back. I was going to put the panels out there, and that would have negated the whole electric bill at 11,000 kilowatts per month.
Wow.
So if people want facts and figures, they can get them from these companies, and but I encourage them to do it. I should have done this 15 years ago.
Yep, you're right. Although 15 years ago, the solar panels were 5 or 10 times more expensive than they are now, and less efficient. Yeah. But it's amazing what they've become. But I think the big point for older Americans is that it will increase the value of your house. And so you may not, you're going to see your utility bills collapse, although you will have invested money in your house. But much of that money, if not most of that money, you will recover. And sometimes, in some cases, you'll recover even more than what it cost you, when your house is sold or when your estate is settled, depending on the case. So, yeah, Michael, well said. Thank you very much for that. Linda in Auburn, Washington. Hey, Linda, what's up?
Hi. I just wanted to bring up 2 points that Putin I read does not like GMOs, and he also doesn't like. He wants marriage between a male and female, and those points are more aligned with the Bible than the United States and maybe Ukraine too.
Yeah, I would argue they're not even aligned with the Bible. But what was the first thing you said he doesn't like? It sounded like you said GMOs, and I'm sure that can't be what you said.
Yeah, that's what I said, and
GMOs.
I read that in the Christian Science Monitor to check out that. Yeah. So those are things that. What if we said we want to avoid GMOs? Also, genetically engineered microbes are really dangerous, and he's saying there were a lot of these CDC labs with doing these, genetically engineered microbes, on his
Which is absolutely a lie. It's just like every county health department has a lab that looks for deadly diseases circulating in the community, and that's what was going on in Ukraine. That's what happens all over the world. The CDC has participated with many of them. It's the early warning system, so that if Ebola pops up someplace, or if there's a recurrence of like the flu virus that wiped out the world in 1918, that we can catch it on the front end. Whether Putin cares about GMOs or not, I'm pretty damn skeptical. It's 44 minutes past the hour. We'll continue our conversation on the other side of this break. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, telling you the truths the multinational corporations would really rather you didn't know all about. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's the place where we dare to ask, is Walmart a person? By the way, my Sunday excerpt is all about that. You can see it at hartmannreport.com. It's really worth reading today. And welcome back. Don in Paragould, Arkansas. Hey, Don, what's on your mind today?
Hey, thank you for taking my call, Tom. What I wanted to say was a couple of weeks ago, I went to Memphis and just for some reason was drawn to go to the National Civil Rights Museum.
Mm-hmm.
And today is the anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King. And I'm just thinking that you don't have to be a CSI detective to go there and see that that's not what happened. The official version is absolutely not even close to what happened. James Earl Ray did not sneak away in a 289 Mustang. I mean, and even the National Archives puts question on the trajectory of the bullet, and they say that they cannot come up with a, so talk about dumbing down the American people. What would have happened if Martin Luther King had lived and actually had been a vice president candidate, and his whole movement of peace and ending war? Would it have been a change in the American, landscape if Martin Luther King had been allowed to live? I mean, one of the reasons why they preserved that Lorraine Motel, and if you haven't been to Memphis, I encourage
I have not.
all of your...
I mean, I've been to Memphis, but I've never seen these sites that you're talking about.
Well, the Lorraine Motel is just down the road from the Peabody. That's the National Archives Museum. That's where that's the exact spot where Martin Luther King was assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why it's still there the way it is because they want you to go there and realize that it didn't happen that way. And that
do they say that out loud, or is this a conclusion you drew?
No, they don't say it out loud, but the National Archives say that the bullet probably didn't come from where they said it came from, and Jesse Jackson and all those guys were pointing someplace else.
Yeah.
The police were on the scene. I encourage you to look into it a little bit more. But today is a very important day, a dark day in American history, something that has been covered up by James Earl Ray. Didn't do this himself. He might have been involved, but why did they put all the attention into Dealey Plaza? Why has there been JFK and all of this stuff? Why hasn't there been a movie about MLK and what happened?
And how did James Earl Ray end up in, what was it, France? He went
England.
to Canada and then, England? He
got arrested in England. The story just doesn't make any sense. We have a hardened criminal that dropped his rifle outside the door of where he was, and you just look into it. And it is a dark day in American history, and it's not going to be declassified until 2027.
Yikes.
From 1968 to 2027.
Oh, 50 years.
The National Archives, and there was a professor, William Peters, that did a mock trial, and they recreated it because James Earl Ray never got a trial, and he was acquitted in trial because they couldn't prove that he did it.
Oh, that's interesting. He's still alive and in prison, isn't he?
No, James Earl Ray has died in prison. He got 99 years.
Yeah.
He confessed. He pleaded guilty and got 99 years. And they didn't do a proper autopsy. There wasn't proper ballistics. At the time, all of the autopsies and recreated ballistics don't point to what happened. And I believe that's the reason why that museum is still there. It's because it's the exact same. Dr. King couldn't stay at the Peabody. He had to stay at the Lorraine.
Yeah.
Half a mile away.
Because of the segregation laws. Yeah, I got it.
National Archives report on assassination.
I'll check it out, Don. Thank you very much. And thanks for reminding me that today is the day that Martin Luther King was assassinated. We'll be right back. Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. Available wherever you find fine books. Hey, just wanted to flag for you this amazing study that came out of the Department of Global Public Health at the University of Bergen in Norway. Lars Fadnes is the professor who oversaw it. They took a massive database of millions and millions of people all around the world, and the goal was to look at life expectancy. And they were looking at everything from pollution to wars to poverty to diet. And because there was so much data and such a large population base, they were able to separate out individual pieces. And what they found, and just looking at the diet piece of this, what they found was that going with what you and I might call the Mediterranean diet, they don't call it that in the study. What they basically say is no red meat, very little dairy, lots of fish, nuts, legumes as the principal protein sources, and lots and lots and lots of fresh fruits and veggies would add 10 years of lifespan to the typical 20-year-old and 8 years of lifespan to the typical 60-year-old. The whole video about it is over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. Welcome back. Tim just called in, or was it Don? My apologies. In any case, it was, and reminded me that today, April 4th, is the anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Somehow that one slipped right by me. But what a sad, sad day in American history. Anyhow, welcome back. Brian in Fort Worth, Texas. Brian, what's on your mind today?
I was just trying to set the record straight on something another caller had mentioned about a lithium shortage.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't actually a lithium shortage. I mean, our oceans are full of it. Aside from that, John B. Goodenough, I don't know if you know the name, but
I don't.
Inventor of random access memory, inventor of lithium-ion batteries, came up with what he's calling the glass battery, which replaces the lithium-ion electrolyte with a salt electrolyte. And
with a what? With salt? Sodium chloride?
Yeah, a solid salt electrolyte.
Huh.
The highlights on it are somewhere between 5 and 6 times the capacity of a comparable lithium-ion, no degradation after 26,000 cycle charges. I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah, this is the area where
they're going with it, though.
Yeah, this is the area where we're going to see really significant improvements over the next 5 years. You're going to see cars that'll charge in a minute or two, the same amount of time it takes to fill your car up with gas, or a few minutes. You're going to see, batteries that don't need to be replaced during the lifetime of the car. I keep an eye on the science news out there, and it's just amazing what's going on. Brian, thank you. Thanks for pointing that out. I appreciate the call. Alejandro in Miami. Hey, Alejandro, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. How are you doing? I just wanted to point out the legal absurdities of the Don't Say Gay bill. Obviously from a legal perspective, since I'm an attorney, I just wanted to point out that 2 things with the bill. First of all, the bill at its best is redundant because we already had a parents, bill, parents education rights bill. Right. Anyways, that was already in the law several years ago. So why was there a need to pass this bill which just copies and pastes that And also just to add the sexual orientation thing. So that's already like a huge red flag. And the fact that the law is pretty vague on what does it mean, instructions about, like sexual orientation or gay. Like people, like the people who defend the bill say there's no gay in the bill. But I think you mentioned before, like, well, yeah, of course they're not going to put that obvious thing forward because they want to be more subtle. And so they create this vagueness around it, which has a chilling effect on free speech. That's what we want. When you look up any laws that violate the First Amendment, you look at what the potential impact could be on free speech. And if it has a chilling effect on free speech, like this law already has a chilling effect on free speech because there's already an LGBT teacher in Miami-Dade County who quit just because she feels that she cannot be open about her sexuality without triggering this law. She feels that, she could be subject to parents.
So, Alejandro, you're a smart attorney. You've offered legal opinions on this program before that have impressed me, and you live in Florida.
Yes.
So, and I read that paragraph from the bill before that teacher was using, and it seems to me like her logic is correct. Is the enforcement mechanism for the bill that you can sue the school or you can sue people?
You can sue the school district, I assume.
Great. So what happens if a straight parent sues the school, or actually, I don't think the gender identity of the parent would matter at all. What happens if some citizen of Florida sues a school district saying that you are teaching gender identity by reading Dick and Jane books because there's a mom and a dad?
I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but sure, you can say, because the way the law is written, I mean, I guess we can go over it again, that, in kindergarten through grade 3 or in a manner that's not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. Of course, the big thing is what is considered age appropriate and what is considered developmentally appropriate. Those are pretty vague terms. Right. Like, what does that mean under a law? I don't know, because the law is pretty vague on that thing. So yes, you could have that realization of, like, hey, if they're talking about straight parents, the gay parents could sue and say, hey, why are you talking about sexual orientation? Like, that's how stupid the thing could be interpreted. And that's a chilling effect, because the teachers don't know what could they say that could trigger a lawsuit, just like the stupid Texas abortion law, where, obviously, people could sue any abortion provider for doing an illegal abortion. Right. Well, this was, I think, it makes it unconstitutional from the get-go. And I think that the lawsuit will win, because it's just the chilling effect of the law.
We are wandering into Viktor Orban, Vladimir Putin territory here. I mean, this is these guys have ridden hate and fear of gay people and or LGBTQ people and racial minorities and religious minorities. I mean, Putin has proclaimed Russia to be a Christian nation. They are driving those things to electoral victories and to power, and it troubles me tremendously. Right. Alejandro, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Jim in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Jim, we have a minute left. What's up?
Thanks for taking my last call here, Tom. Thanks, jam-packed Monday news day. I'll tell you that. And just wanted to get a real quick shout out that New Mexico finally got on board legalization of marijuana last Friday.
Congratulations.
They had $1.3 million worth of sales on Friday, $1 million on Saturday, and it tapered off a bit on Sunday. But that's a fantastic thing, and that just shows how positive it can be. The reason why I did call you, though, Tom, is just this. Oh, I'm hearing the music.
We're out of time, Jim. Jim,
Yeah.
I'll give you a pass. You can call back any other time that you want this week and just reference this conversation, and you can make your point. Jim, thanks a lot for the call. And I appreciate the news flash from New Mexico. Thanks so much for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, right? It's an all-in game. So let's play it. Let's participate. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. Have a great afternoon this afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you. Stay safe and pray for peace in the world. We really need it now. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at hartmanreport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com.
Say fight back!